next one's for the anyway. Can I call upon my Imam Manzoor Ahmad Shakir to say the prayers, please?
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim da'iman abadan ala habibika khairil khalqi kullihimi. We begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful, most kind. O Allah, you are most praiseworthy, and all praises belong to you. Belongs to you the dominion and the kingdom of the worlds. We ask you to invoke our prayers, our greetings, our salutations upon all the prophets and messengers, including the last prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We ask you to bless our gathering, make it beneficial, and make it a means for us to prosper. We ask you, our Lord, to instill in us to become good decision makers and benefactors to our communities whom we serve. Our Lord, enable us to lead by examples. O Allah Almighty, everything we do is for your pleasure and for the pleasures of your prophets and messengers and for the pleasure of your final prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We ask you to bless, and we ask for your pleasure, and we ask the pleasure of prophets, and we ask for the pleasure of the community we serve. We ask you to remove the trouble that the people are afflicted with all across the world, especially those countries that have recently suffered from the flood. O Allah, we ask you to send rain as means of nourishment and not as means of punishment. O Allah, help us live in this world as human beings who tolerate, who have mutual understanding. And finally, we ask you, Allah, to bless the people of this house, enable them to make good decisions for the betterment of the communities, and we ask you to bless them with good health, long life, and prosperity. Ameen.
Thank you. Please be seated. If members wish to remove the jackets, they may do so. May I remind members and members of the public that this meeting will be streamed live on webcast from the Council's website. Well, in that case, relax for 5 minutes. Thank you for pointing it out. Yeah, it's 6:10 on my watch, Jim. Thank you. The first item in open council is public questions. Question time. Questions have been received for cabinet members, from members of the public, and the questions will be taken in the order they were received. I call on Mr. Fitzpatrick to ask the first question received via email.
Have you abandoned the Hotel Future project? And if you are determined to proceed with this scheme, what is the start date? What will be the financial contribution from the council? Will it still be a regional training centre? And how many jobs are you claiming it will produce?
Thank you. Thank you for that. I call on Councillor McMahon to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I thank the questioner for taking the trouble to submit the question? We're still working through the detailed assessment of the Hotel Future bid. There'll be a future report that will come to a cabinet meeting before Christmas that will outline the different options available to council, of which Hotel Future will be one of those options. We're determined to get good value for money for the Oldham taxpayer, and clearly that requires due diligence and making sure that the scheme is financially viable and robust. So we're just going through that process now. That report will also outline the number of jobs that will be created, the economic impact of the hotel being there and the wider economic benefit, and also outline a capital build schedule, which will include, of course, the start date.
Thank you. The next question has been submitted via email from Julia Turner. I'll call on Councillor Harrison to respond. Do we have... One second, Councillor Harrison. Do we have the lady here?
If you want to read the question.
I'll read it out. I attended the show on Crompton District Executive on the 22nd of July, where I listened to the local councillors putting forward 4 proposals for getting money together to carry out the work so that show baths can reopen. Please, can the council tell me when you considered these proposals and what decision did you make? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank Ms Turner for this question. The Council's executive decision not to reopen Crompton Pool was made under delegated powers by myself and Councillor Jabbar, the 2 most relevant portfolio holders, and following detailed considerations of all issues and options. Following the meeting of the Shaw and Crompton District Executive, Councillor Jabbar and I have revisited the report and the issues and given careful consideration to the motion proposed. As you may be aware, the decision to replace Crompton Pool was taken back in March 2012 following a review of the leisure estate. Crompton Pool was originally scheduled to close when the replacement Royton Leisure Centre opens in 2016. Around £40,000 worth of repair work had already been carried out since March 2012 before another survey showed additional works were needed to replace the boiler, which would cost up to a further £50,000 just to keep the facility open on a short-term basis. We were also clear in July this year, when announcing that Crompton Pool would have to remain closed permanently, that the boiler replacement would not alone guarantee that the pool would continue to be usable until the opening date of the new Royton facility. Since we took this decision in July, another survey has found further issues, including cracks to the pool structure itself, and advises the cost would run beyond the initial £50,000 that your motion seeks to earmark in order to keep the facility open temporarily. Our decision to close the Crompton pool earlier than was originally planned is based on sound evidence and financial projections. We have to face facts that the building is now beyond economical repair, and there is also no viable business case or community asset transfer proposal in place to save it. As a consequence, our decision not to reopen the pool remains. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. The next question has been submitted via email from Dawn B, and I will ask Councillor Brownridge to respond once I've read it. I've heard that Bulky Bob's is using staff that have been hired by Oldham Council to do specific jobs in the community, like keeping our streets clear of fly tipping, to sell this furniture to the general public and not just the less well-off. In doing so, they are empire building and using staff paid by the council tax with the full backing of the Oldham Council, which must be wrong, if not illegal. I would like to know why this company seems to have been given preferential treatment by the Oldham Council. Can I ask Councillor Brownridge to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bulky Bob's is a social enterprise, which means that it's a non-profit making organisation. So all their activity is designed to maximise social value in the communities in which they operate. And any surplus they make is reinvested back into the business to further this work. The activity they carried out followed a full procurement exercise and is largely covered by the charge for the service, and the majority of reusable furniture is made available to vulnerable and disadvantaged members of the community. On average, about 10 households a month benefit. Any income that's gained from furniture that's actually sold directly to the public is reinvested into the service. And this means that Bulky Bob's can go on investing in employing and training the long-term out of work or individuals with other barriers to employment, which enables them to gain work experience and qualifications which otherwise would be closed to them. They're commissioned to actively seek out opportunities for collaboration with relevant organisations such as the housing providers to continue to develop the ways in which they can deliver their social value. And this contract is monitored very carefully to make sure they continue to do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brownridge. The next question has been submitted by Gerald Brierley via email. I will call on Councillor Stratton to respond to this. What is the Council's exit plan for the sports centre on Lord Street when the new centre on Manchester Street is opened? Councillor Stratton?
I thank Mr Brierley for his question. The site of the current sports facility on Lord Street is considered to be a key regeneration site within the town centre, and we are currently in the process of assessing the most appropriate use for this site. The Council is working towards creating an exciting and vibrant town centre, and sites such as this will be key to the delivery of that.
Thank you, Councillor Stratton. I call Mr Charles McCall to ask his question submitted by email. I believe he's not here. Is that right? I'll try and read this out. There are many businesses in Oldham that are struggling to make ends meet. They create regular employment for local people. They also supply goods to customers at competitive rates. They pay good wages to their employees, and their safety and training of staff is exemplary. Yet Oldham Council seems set on giving away tens of thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money to a multi-million pound company which hides behind the guise of Bulky Bob's, the FRC group. This undermines local businesses who pay their way in the community and gives an unfair monetary and technical advantage to the company that certainly does not need it. When the facilities they offer are already available in town, all this is doing is putting these facilities under one roof, when the money is being used could be spent on local businesses who supply these services already. to help them improve the availability of these services to the less well-off in the community. Has anyone in the council looked at the effects that bringing companies like this in us on local employment and local businesses in our town? I'm going to ask Councillor Brownridge to respond to that. Or is it Councillor Akhtar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank Mr. McCall for his question. The contract for the bulky household waste collection, recycling and disposal services was procured in accordance with European Union procurement regulations via an overdue open tender process. Following fully compliant procurement process inviting organisations and companies to bid for the work, the contract was awarded to Bulky Bobs Limited in June 2012 for a 4-year term with a contractual option to extend for a further 1 year. Bulky Bobs is a social enterprise based in Oldham and is part of the Furniture Resource Centre Group, or FRC Group, which operates on a national basis in partnership with local authorities right throughout the UK. The contract secured by Oldham Council is operated from the Oldham Bulky Bobs depot on contracts employees from the Oldham Borough. In addition to the delivery of the service specification, this supplier also works to create benefits for local socially excluded people through access to essential furniture that is needed to make a home, and Councillor Brownridge has already outlined that. They also provide local work opportunities, apprenticeship training and volunteering opportunities. In addition to the bulky waste collection service and recycling opportunities, Bulky Bobs delivers a key social value benefit to Oldham through supporting their employees to become more involved in the wider community. This contract is monitored by the procurement team to ensure all key performance indicators are met in full and to also ensure the social values proposed in the original bid are delivered in full. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Akhtar. The next question has been submitted by David Cartwright via Twitter. I will call on Councillor Brownridge to respond. Why? Oh, is it? Yeah, okay. Please, Mr. Cartwright.
Good evening. My question is, why are the residents of Medlock Vale being discriminated against by our local councillors not holding ward surgeries?
Can I ask Councillor Brownridge to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright, for your question. Our council approach is an open council approach about bringing the council closer to the communities and having an open and transparent approach to, as is reflected in our streaming of council meetings, Twitter and all these modern social media things that I don't understand. The councillors from Medlock Vale took a decision not to hold formal ward surgeries after reviewing the number of constituents who actually attended. The members, as local leaders, wanted to engage more with their constituents in a more flexible way, which more suits the local community better, rather than restricting them to fixed surgeries and fixed points of access. They have a number of locally arranged meetings, such as the Barnsley and Hathershaw Home Watch, the Community Group Network and the Hathershaw Advisory Group. The contact details are openly available, so when they're contacted by residents, they will make themselves available to meet them at a venue and time that's convenient to that constituent. They can also be contacted via the Oldham District team, who can arrange a special meeting and provide updates for ongoing casework. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brownridge. The next question has been submitted by Stephen Barrow via email. Do we have Mr. Barrow here? Okay, I'll give you another try. In the past, Oldham Council have used community payback team to maintain the derelict site in Durkar. There now seems to be no program of works in place to maintain these sites. The community payback do not have the expertise nor the equipment to manage derelict land on such a scale. This now means, can we have a bit of quiet, please, on my left? This now means that council taxpayers in Durkar are paying for a non-existent service, and this is unfair. The result is that sites on Flint Street, Marble Street, Abbotsford Road, London Road, Ramsey Street, Harcourt Street and Vulcan Street are overgrown with weeds. In some cases, they are being fly-tipped, causing blight to the area. Will the relevant cabinet member explain to the residents what steps they intend taking to remedy this situation with timescale, and please don't suggest the community can manage these sites. They are far too big, and clearing these sites will need professional equipment. Will the cabinet member also advise what steps are being taken to market this land and when the next phase of building will take place? Can I ask Councillor Hibbert to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I, through you, thank ex-Liberal Democrat Mr Stephen Barrow for his question. My information is that he's fled the country, and I'm not surprised at that. Following the sudden withdrawal of housing market renewal funding by ex-Councillor Barrow's very own government, and our colleagues on the right here, the council purchased and demolished the remaining homes in Durkar. Keep Moats are already developing 165 new homes on land cleared through HMR around parts of Durkar Street, Acre Lane and London Road. So far, they've made excellent progress, having already built 122 homes and are 18 months ahead of programme. Guinness Northern Counties have also recently completed 12 new homes on other vacant land on Acre Lane. Given that no legacy HMR funding was left by Mr Barrow's government and our colleagues on the right to maintain vacant sites, the maintenance of these areas has been carried out by community payback. However, dwindling resources in the probation service, and we all know again who's responsible for that, have unfortunately now meant that they are unable to carry out this work to the standards they had previously managed. Because of this, council officers are now looking at an alternative approach to the maintenance of these sites. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. But will you make sure that respond reaches him, whether he's in the country or out of country? Thank you. The next question has been submitted by Brian Herner via Twitter, and I'll ask Councillor Brownbridge to respond. Do we have him here? No? What are you doing about street cleaning? The town's streets are an absolute dump with rubbish everywhere.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I shall start off by saying I don't recognise that description of Oldham at all. I think it's wholly over-exaggerated. And in actual fact, our borough is one of the cleanest boroughs in this area. Now, in fairness, I accept that because of the cutbacks, the number of people we employ to street clean has fallen, and inevitably there is a consequence of that. But I make the point that if people didn't throw the litter down in the first place, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We have addressed the way that we deal with this matter, and we are, as you will see from the papers recently, we are quite firm in taking action against people that we actually catch fly tipping. And we do put out a plea to the communities that if you know people doing this, if you can provide us with information about people doing it, we will take action. Over the last 6 months, we've started really taking action against people, and so you will have seen in the press the number of people that we've taken to court. We've also proactively invested £250,000 to recruit 10 new street cleaners and additional enforcement staff, and they will be acting particularly on the very high visibility routes. But ultimately, it is down to members of the community, all of us in the community, to actually stop dropping litter. And if we don't drop it, we don't have to pick it up. So I put out that plea to everybody. Please stop dropping it. Report people who are dropping it, and we'll fine them. But it would be much better if you didn't drop it in the first place, and then we could spend our money much more wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brownbridge. Now, this is the last question. We're running out of time. So the next question has been submitted by Becky Newton via Facebook. I will call on Councillor Harrison to respond. I would like the Council to consider reinstating Oldham Wakes Week. This would give Oldham parents an opportunity to take their children in holiday at a cheaper time. This could be replaced by a week either at Easter or summer. Please could the Council consider it. Councillor Harrison.
Ms Darling-Newton for the question, and I know that it's a topic that it's quite a hot topic with quite a number of people, especially with school-age families. But the deregulation bill, which includes provisions regarding the school year and school holidays, has recently been passed by Parliament. Therefore, all schools now are responsible for setting their own school year and holiday patterns. But the Council convened a working group in the autumn term with both primary and secondary schools and appropriate agencies to ensure there is a coordinated plan across Oldham. The working group will be given a number of versions of a school year plan to consider, and one of these will be a 2-week break at summer half term. However, this is unlikely to happen in the secondary sector as the exam period for GCSEs and A-levels runs at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Now we move into formal council business. Can I have apologies, please? I'm a step ahead here. Is councillors' questions on ward or district matters? Questions have been received for cabinet members from councillors on ward and district matters. I call on Councillor Iqbal to ask his question as submitted.
Thank you. Over the last few years, we've seen a proliferation of recycling cloth bank popping up all over the town. It seems that these big metal containers are appearing suddenly overnight and people are using these as rubbish dumps. Could the Cabinet member please advise what the Council's policy is and what the Council are doing to get these cloth banks regulated so that they require consent from the Council and from local residents?
Councillor Iqbal, the question I've got printed here is different to the one you're asking.
Just 1 second. Apologies, I've got 2 questions here. Which one is it? Okay, I'll start again. Can the Cabinet member responsible for what action has been taken to increase the number of houses available for families in Wearmouth? How many new houses have been built and what steps are being taken to ensure that the empty houses are brought back into use? I'll call on Councillor Hibbert to respond. Thank you.
I'll do that. Councillor Hibbert. Councillor Hibbert.
Thank you, Councillors Hussain and Iqbal. I've already referred to HMR, the Housing Market Renewal, and following the sudden withdrawal of that funding, the Council and its partners have taken an innovative approach to regenerating South Wearmouth, both in terms of bringing back empty homes into use and building new homes. With regards to empty homes, we've completed a scheme in partnership with Great Places Housing Group, where 33 derelict terraces have been comprehensively refurbished into 20 larger affordable homes. These have now all been let to families in housing need. We've sold 38 dispersed derelict terrace properties and been furnished to a high standard under licence by residents themselves. So far, over 20 have been refurbished. In terms of building new homes, we've agreed a custom-built scheme to develop 37 6-bedroom bespoke homes in council-owned council-owned land in South Werneth and with Community Build Werneth. The group who paid open market value for the land have recently submitted a detailed planning application. Countryside have almost completed selling 112 new homes in Oatmill Close, Oatmill Chase in South Werneth, and in North Werneth, Keepmoat are completing their latest phase of 52 new homes in St John's Walk. Officers are working with Keepmoat to begin work on the next phase at North Werneth. I think, Mr Mayor, I think we can all agree that following the debacle of housing market renewal, this has been a remarkable recovery that has been achieved by this council and its partners. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hibbert. I call on Councillor Klonowski to ask his question as submitted, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. On behalf of constituents in Spring Head, I would like to ask why the road crossing in Oldham Road close to Walker's Lane is just a zebra crossing, whereas the crossings in Lees and Groton are pelican crossings. The residents are aware that they welcome the borough-wide review of pedestrian crossings. Nevertheless, they are of the view that the traffic conditions near Walker's Lane are similar to those in Lees and Groton and therefore merit a pelican crossing. I know the council takes road safety seriously and will be grateful for clarification so I can report back to constituents. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Hibbert to respond?
Thank you, Councillor Konowski. The zebra crossing on the A669 Oldham Road, adjacent to Walker's Lane, is currently one of the facilities in Oldham that's being reviewed as part of the borough-wide review of crossings. As part of this review, this crossing is going to benefit from the introduction of an LED Belisha beacon upgrade, similar to those recently introduced in Shaw and Royton, and it will be relined. Can I say that residents in Royton in particular have contacted me and expressed their extreme satisfaction with the improved crossing, and we're looking towards installing these where necessary elsewhere in the borough. I can confirm that there have been no accidents at the Walker's Lane in crossing involving pedestrians. However, there were two collisions that did take place in 2000-2001, but these involved vehicles running into the rear of another vehicle that was stopped at the crossing. I can provide Councillor Klonowski with a hard electronic copy of this full reply if he wishes, and I will arrange that. As with all the replies to members, we'll ask Constitutional Services to do that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hibbert. I now call on Councillor Murphy to ask a question as submitted, please.
The Cabinet member is aware that Shaw and Crompton District Executive passed 4 resolutions to find the money to repair Crompton Pool and reopen it for the public. Until its recent closure, Crompton Pool was regularly used by hundreds of local people. The people of Shaw and Crompton want their local pool reopened. On tonight's agenda, we have a petition signed by 961 local people calling for just this, a clear demonstration of the strength of local feeling. Yet the Cabinet member has dismissed all 4 of these options out of hand, even the one where the District Executive agreed to spend its own money to reopen the pool. Now I am a new member of the Council and of the District Executive. As a Liberal Democrat, I believe that ward councillors and local people know what's best for their own communities. My understanding was that this Labour Council was also committed to devolving power to local councillors, to act as local leaders and to district executives to serve those communities. So surely it is wrong that Shaw and Crompton District Executive is being denied the right to spend its devolved budget to reopen an asset that provides services that are so valued by our local community. Or is it simply that this administration plays lip service to localism and wants its district executives to play the nodding donkey to this Labour Council's diktat? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, can I, lesser clapping hand at the moment, can I, Councillor Jenny Harris, Councillor McMahon is going to respond to that.
Thank you to Councillor Murphy for the question. It just feels as though this same question is being asked over and over again in different ways and answered fully each time. And Councillor McMahon would like to provide the answer on this occasion. Thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I thank the councillor for his question. He is perhaps demonstrating his naivety and inexperience in this to believe that money that is devolved to a district executive of this council is not council money. It is council money. The situation has been explained. What hasn't been explained, perhaps, is a very technical reason, legitimate reason why the temporary measure that you were putting forward just won't work. The temporary boiler equipment that effectively comes as 2 large porta cabins is our backup system for our schools. So if the heating system goes down during winter, we're able to deploy them and keep the school up and running. If those were used on a permanent basis, semi-permanent basis for Crompton Pool, it wouldn't just mean that the schools would have to close. We couldn't do that, of course. But it would mean we'd have to spend £100,000 on replacement boilers to go into the school, because you've taken the temporary boilers to bolt onto the side of the pool. Now, we are up for devolution. The Friends of Shore Bath Group are given more than an opportunity to put a business case forward to take on the pool. And they don't want to do it. Why don't they want to do it? Because that is not a viable pool. You know it's not viable. The reason why, when you were in control of this council, you didn't do anything to save it yourself is because you know that. So this is just party politics. Do you not think the people in Shore are going to get pretty sick of being used? They can see through this. Have you gone on Twitter or Facebook to see what local people are saying? They might sign the petition that you put in front of them, but they're calling you hypocrites, they're calling you liars. They know that you had the chance to do something about this, and you know you're not being honest when you go to them and say it can be left open, because it can't. The backlog maintenance is £1 million. £1 million this council has not got. So stop playing games, because you will ultimately lose on this. But I'll make one last offer, and it's your final offer, so think about it. There are a number of people who are dual-hatted in this chamber, who also sit on Shore and Crompton Parish Council, and there are plenty of people on that parish council who are happy to grandstand and abuse the public and use them and fool them, who are now going to be given an opportunity. You can have that pool free of charge, Parish Council. Okay, we'll sign it over tomorrow and you can run it yourself, with everything else that comes with it. So you can have the £1 million backlog maintenance, you can have an out-of-date, decrepit building, and you can have all the costs that's going to come with it. Okay? That's the offer. You can take it.
Okay, can I call on Councillor Dean to ask the next question, please, as submitted?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I could ask the appropriate Cabinet member for an update on the proposed scheme for the private sector landlord licensing, and exactly where it's up to and how it would affect the people of Waterhead. And could I also be informed of how many enforcement staff would actually be employed or anticipated to be employed to actually manage and run this scheme?
Can I call on Councillor Hibbert to respond?
Can I thank Councillor Dean for his question? The detailed neighbourhood consultation exercise is currently ongoing, with approximately 10,000 of the 15,000 properties already having been visited. So far, we've recorded 2,202 resident responses. The closing date for the consultation is the 30th of September 2014. In addition to this work, letters have been sent to all known private landlords that rent out properties in the highlighted neighbourhoods. This is 1,857 in total. That figure amazed me, Mr Mayor. Landlords have been asked to contribute to the consultation process with their views, and has also been invited to a series of drop-in sessions throughout August with officers at Chadderton Town Hall. This gives them the chance to raise any questions or concerns directly with the officers. The same offer of the drop-in sessions has also been extended to the 87 known letting agents that are managing properties in the neighbourhoods. Posters are also being displayed in various public buildings, advertising the scheme and the consultation period. The intensive street-by-street visits in Waterhead are ongoing, with 343 private landlords identified and written to. In answer to the second point, the number of staff that will be employed to administer the scheme cannot be determined at this stage until the results of the consultation exercise have been analysed and proposals developed. The fee to be charged for the licence can only cover the cost of setting up and running the scheme. There is a misconception and a rumour, whether malicious or mischievous or not, I don't know, that this scheme is being set up in order to boost the coffers of the council. Can I make it absolutely clear to everybody in this council chamber and anybody who is watching this broadcast that that is not the case? Any funding that is brought in by the scheme can only be spent on the scheme and will not be used for any other purpose, especially boosting the coffers of the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hibbert. I call on Councillor Heffernan to ask the next question as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is the Cabinet member responsible for communities aware that First Bus carried out a public consultation regarding changes to Service 350 in October and November 2013? These changes, since implemented, have adversely affected residents of Delft, Scout-Head, Osterlands and the north-east part of Lees. The public response, according to First Bus, was the highest ever known, and yet the details of that consultation have never been published more than 9 months after they took place. Is it true the results of that consultation did not agree with the requirements of the company? When will the details of that consultation be made available in detail to the public? Will the company return the service to its original route and make 2 supermarkets, doctor's surgery, hairdressers, barbers, pubs, cafes and other businesses available to the elderly, the disabled and mothers with young children? Or explain to the public why not? The advice I have received is to use 2 buses each way or taxis. Is that advice considered reasonable? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Heffernan. Can I call on Councillor Brownridge to respond? Was it Councillor Hibbert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question does refer to transport, and Councillor Brownridge and I are not quite sure why her name is on the sheet. Therefore, I will respond to it. And in doing so, can I thank Councillor Heffernan. I've been in contact with Heffernan. Nan. It says Nan, Heffernan. You know better than me, Derek. I'm not going to argue with you. I've been in contact with First Bus, and they've confirmed that they ran a bus consultation for the communities of Saddleworth and Lees in October and November 2013 on local bus services 81A, 180, 184, 350, 353 and 354. They held drop-in lessons at Lees Library in Upper Mill and at Delft Methodist Church Hall, and the community could complete an online survey. The consultation closed on the 8th of November 2013. As a result of the changes, they increased the frequency of the 180 and improved the Sunday 184 service, which is well publicised through a number of channels. First Bus recognised that there remain a number of requests regarding the 350 service which they are considering. In undertaking a review, they need to ensure that any changes they introduce would be sustainable and be for the benefit of the vast majority of their passengers. First, they have advised that they welcome feedback. First Bus have advised that they welcome feedback from customers and the local community and are keen to ensure that they deliver the right solution. First Bus have offered to share with us the comments they received regarding the 350 service as part of the review they are offering, an offer I am taking up with them, and I make a commitment, Derek Heffernan, Councillor Heffernan, to keep you fully updated on that. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Heffernan. Can I ask Councillor Mushtaq to ask the next question as submitted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are currently in the consultation phase of the proposed landlord licensing scheme. There seems to be considerable misconception amongst landlords in Alexander regarding the scheme. For example, one landlord was under the impression he'd be paying in excess of £600 a year to be part of the scheme. Landlords are also querying what their money will be spent on. in practical terms, what will being part of the scheme mean? Most of the landlords who have multiple properties believe they'll be paying over £500 a year, and again, they're unaware what will be delivered for the outlay. I think there's some serious myth busting to be done regards the scheme if we are to win the hearts and minds of those involved in the scheme. Can the relevant member of the Cabinet please provide more detail in terms of costs and details as to what the scheme will involve? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbert to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mushtaq. Thank you, Councillor Mushtaq, for your question. I've referred to this slightly in an earlier reply, but in response to my colleague, I can assure him again that the proposed licence fee is a one-off figure to cover the whole of the potential 5-year period. This figure has not been set yet, as we are actively consulting both residents and private landlords at the moment about the details of any scheme. The leaflet sent out highlighted the proposed one-off fee, subject to change during the consultation period. The aim of the scheme is to ensure that all privately rented properties in the area are managed to a satisfactory standard. The benefits to the scheme to an area will include the following: higher management standards in the private rented sector. I'm sure nobody could disagree with that. Landlord training and forums to include assistance with tenancy agreements. Improved image and perceptions of an area. Provide advice to ensure landlords are protected from poor tenants. In relation to the costs of the scheme, these are indicative at this stage, as officers are still engaged in the consultation work across a number of areas. When the consultation is complete and the results analysed, proposals will be developed that detail the fee level for approval. The fee to be charged for the licence can only cover the cost of setting up and running the scheme. While I acknowledge that many landlords, in fact probably the majority, provide decent, well-managed accommodation, it is also recognised and accepted by many that there are poor management practices and a lack of knowledge within the sector, which is having a negative effect on some areas. I repeat what I said last council meeting, Mr. Mayor. We intend this to be, we expect it to be a badge of honour for landlords. We expect it to be something that letting managers will put to their prospective tenants and say, in order to assure them that they're getting a quality service for the rent that they're paying. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hibbert. The time's up now, so we're going to move on to the next item. Councillor McMahon.
I think we're slightly a victim of our own success on this webcam, Twitter, Facebook interaction. We've had around 55 public questions that clearly we've not been able to get through tonight. We are going to find a way of putting those questions and the responses to those questions online so that people can see them.
Good. That's excellent, Councillor McMahon. Can we just formally move into the council business now? Can I have apologies? Councillor Blythe and Councillor Chatterton. Thank you. The council agreed that the council minutes from the meeting held on the 16th of July 2014 are agreed as a correct record of the meeting. A revised set of minutes has been circulated. Agreed? Agreed. David?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to make a comment on the minutes of the 16th of July. At that meeting, and approximately 1 hour, 15 minutes and 48 seconds into the meeting, Councillor Sykes set the footbridge cost of £800,000 to build in 1963. He assumed, calculated somehow, that was 1.5 million at today's prices. He then asked the leader to confirm the proposals to demolish cost £500,000. He added these figures together then to suggest that this was a total of £2 million spent on, to quote him, this folly. He also referred to further costs of providing alternative crossing provision nearby. I didn't recognise these figures, so I made inquiries, and by the 23rd of July, it only took a week to find out this information, that the figures that Councillor Sykes had quoted were absolutely way out of all proportion, and in fact, and only Councillor Sykes can clarify whether this was a deliberate attempt to mislead people. The cost of demolishing the Manchester Street footbridge is definitely, Mr Mayor, not £500,000. In fact, the budget for the scheme at the moment is £65,000. Can only be decided eventually by the value of the scrap metal. And as such, the cost could exceed the 65, but it will certainly not exceed £100,000. On the 29th of July, Mr Mayor, I emailed Councillor Sykes and pointed out these discrepancies. And I explained that his comments and assertions were based upon an extrapolation and assumptions. And I pointed out that his conclusion was completely false and an outrageous statement.
Yeah, Councillor Hibbert, I know where you're coming from, but the minutes of the 16th of July, they are correct or not?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm not disputing them for 1 minute.
Well, if that's the case, I think you better sit down.
No, I was simply going to offer Councillor Sykes an opportunity to apologise. He's not taken it up so far.
But I don't think it's relevant. And no, I don't want you standing up now, Councillor Sykes. And that's the reason why I've asked him to sit down as well, Councillor Sykes.
And I now demand the same right under the standing orders.
So if it's
some of the things that Councillor Hibbert has said, and also correct some misinformation.
So I'll allow you on personal. Okay, Councillor Sykes.
First thing is, I actually asked the question, is could the leader... Thank you. Well, somebody switch my mic on now, Warren, so we'll be all right. I asked the leader, could he confirm if it was £500,000, and he neither confirmed or denied. I think Councillor Hibbert, where I will say he's right, and it's the only one thing he is right about what he spoke about, due to a typographical error, the demolition costs are £65,000, not £500,000. But I'm very surprised he couldn't remember that in the meeting, because it was only a couple of days before he actually signed the delegated report that told you how much those were. So he could have sorted that out all at the meeting. Now, what Councillor Hibbert didn't do is ask me to correct that. What he actually said is, and I read verbatim, I regard your behaviour as a deliberate ploy to mislead Council and the residents of Oldham. Well, I can assure you, Mr Mayor, it wasn't, it isn't, so I didn't even dignify and the other rubbish in his email with a reply. I think that now sets the record straight. Typographical error, asked the leader to confirm or deny, he never did. I never said it cost £500,000, and the other figures, Mr Mayor, and I owe you an apology for this, are incorrect because I underestimated them. It was actually £850,000 to build the bridge and actually 1.2 million for the other two bridges, not the 800,000 I said in my question. I think that sets the record straight, Mr Mayor, and hopefully Mr Hibbert.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Sykes. I'm going to move on now. I don't want to... No, I think we leave it at that, Councillor Hibbert. Declarations of interest. Are there... Let's move on now, please. Are there any declarations of interest from members in respect of matters to be determined by the Council at this meeting? Can members declare any matters to the meeting? There will also be a form circulated around the chamber for members to complete if they have an interest. I don't have any urgent business. I don't have any urgent business for tonight. Communications, petitions. I have received 2 petitions which are noted. I now call on Council Leader, Councillor McMahon, to address the Chamber with his annual statement. Please, Councillor Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I probably need to warn people in the Council chamber that this is not a short address. So, if you need to get caffeine to keep you going through it, I fully understand that. Now might be a good time. The annual report, as the name suggests, is something that we do every year, and the intention is we look back at the achievements of the council and the town, and we also reflect on the challenges that the town faces too. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to reflect on the basic services that the council delivers, because I believe, and I think we all believe, that that's what the public care about. They care about the clean streets, they care about the schools and everything else that comes with it, right to emptying people's bin. I do believe that Oldham has been on an improvement journey, and actually it's been on that route for some time. We're now ambitious, we're very confident as a council, and we know where we're going. We're not saying we're perfect. I don't think anybody is perfect, and I don't think any organisation of this size can say that we get absolutely everything right 100% of the time. But we do try. And the staff that work for the authority, I believe, deserve a great vote of thanks from the Chamber for going out there, delivering frontline services in all weathers to the whole community right across Oldham. I could stand here and read lists, because that's what us politicians do, and there would be a long list. Significant projects. I could talk about the Odeon Cinema and the deal that was signed to bring the Old Town Hall back into use. You know, laid derelict for many years, now will be the jewel in Oldham's crown. People will travel a distance to see that. But that's been well rehearsed before, and it's been the subject of a number of questions that's come here. I could go into detail about the decrease by 24% in the number of young people out of work, out of education, training. But that's been covered in the Oldham Chronicle very recently. I could talk in detail about the St Mary's housing scheme that Dave knows very close to his heart, won a national award as a pioneering housing scheme. Or even our most recent SATS results, where our young people did the best they've ever done, topping the national average, something that we can all be proud of. The test is always, of course, what you do for the next generation, and I think Oldham as a town can be very proud of what we have done on that front. The building work that's going on right across town, actually people can see now, the cranes are in the sky. I think that's always Councillor Hibbert's mark of success. Can people see the cranes? Well, the cranes are everywhere, and there will be more of them as we begin our journey on rebuilding Oldham. You can see the new college, you can see First Choice Homes, you can see the sports centre being built right across the road from this civic centre. And for Latics fans, you can see the North Stand coming out the ground well and truly, long overdue, and I believe will give the football club a new boost of confidence. We could navel gaze, we could look at the council internally and talk about the peer review that talks about, you know, the remarkable transformation that the council's undertaken, talks about the ambition and the effectiveness that the council now has. I could talk about us being highly commended for the best council in the country, but I won't do that, although I couldn't resist getting it in. What people do care about, though, are the things that they see, feel and experience. People do care if the streets are clean. They do care if the park is well maintained, and they do care that the bin is emptied. There is a very odd judgment about how effective a council is, so most members of the public believe that the council tax they pay funds 100% everything that the council does, and all the council does is to empty the wheeler bins. That's a general perception about the transactional relationship with the council. Of course, we know it's more complicated than that. But, you know, it's been a really challenging time. We've already taken £141 million out the council's budget. I should be very clear, these are not all savings. There were some savings to be made in there. We are more efficient than we were, but quite a lot of that is cuts. Things have been taken away, reduced. The number of staff on the ground have been reduced. The number of services that people receive have been reduced. And in some cases, the quality of service that people receive would have reduced as well. That's inevitable. Now, that's today. We've got another £60 million to take out the council's budget, and that really provides thinking for everybody in this chamber. How do you meet the challenges that lay ahead when our ambition for Oldham to grow is more determined than ever? Put that into context. So the £201 million is half of the council's money gone. Now just picture what that would mean for your own household income. So if your wages were to cut in half, what that might mean for your home, for your mortgage or for your rent. What might it mean for the car that you drive, or do you have to get the bus or even walk? Do you have to stop doing things? Do you stop eating out? Do you stop taking the kids or the grandkids or going out with friends to socialise? If your household income was cut in half, what consequence would that happen? What would it bring? Well, we're in a very similar situation. There are consequences to that money being taken out, and there are consequences to the services that people receive. And I want to try and explain what we're trying to do to kind of rebut that as much as is possible. But we can only do that if our financial house is in order. Now, you've heard Councillor Jabbar on many occasions stand up and trumpet the work of the finance team. He's not just a proud father of the finance team, although he has every right to be, given the work that gets done in there. Genuinely, our books are in order. And that might, you might take it for granted, but they're not just in order. The financial position of this council, despite the cuts, is actually very solid. So we were the quickest public sector organisation in the country to submit our annual accounts, unqualified. That was faster than 45% of FTSE 100 companies. So when people say, look to the private sector to see what you can do better, actually I would say to 45% of the FTSE 100, come to Oldham Council and we'll tell you what you can do better. Because on that measure, we're doing very well indeed. Now that's a bit academic. People expect competency and they have a right to demand it. But it is very important when we come to the challenges that lay ahead. As a council, our ambition gets stronger every year. It doesn't decrease, even though our budgets do. And we're very keen to make sure that the Oldham of the future is one that people are proud of. Now, I often get accused of being blind to Oldham's problems. If I ever get into a Twitter argument with somebody, it's because they don't think I'm facing up to the problems in the town. It's not because of that at all, actually. If I drive past litter, I see the litter. If I drive past properties that are run down, I see the properties that are run down. If I drive over a pothole, I'll swear at the council, like everybody else does, until I realise that I am one member of the council, and I probably should report it. So I'm not immune from any of that. But I don't have a rose-tinted view about how good Oldham was in the past either. Because I think sometimes people overplay, the golden era, whatever that was Oldham. But what I am is passionate about our future and accepting the challenges, and like any major town or city, we have those. I believe the future of Oldham is very positive indeed. I want to talk about some of the very basic services that people receive. Highways. Now, this isn't just important for drivers of cars or vans or trucks or whatever. If you're on the bus and you go over a pothole, you feel it. If you're a cyclist, then you see it. If you're walking on a pavement and the pavement's cracked or there's holes in, then you'll notice it or you'll trip up on it. Pavements and roads affect everybody, and whenever we do the resident survey, it's the thing that comes top of the list of things that people aren't happy with. Whenever we're on Twitter or on Facebook, it's the things that people will rightly complain about. And to be honest, the roads in Oldham are not the best that they can be. That's given. But what we're not going to do is to accept that's inevitable. The investment that we're making in roads, and you'll see that on the main roads across town, you'll see it on Metrolink, are about getting the basic infrastructure of the town right. Because it's not all about the big projects, this. When an investor comes, they don't just come and drive to the site they're going to invest in. They will take account of the town in its broader sense as well. If the town isn't clean, if the potholes are there and they get, they bump over them, then the investor will have a view about how secure the place is that they're investing in the way that taxpayers do. And I think that taxpayers deserve a better deal. That's the foundation for actually delivering a better service going forward. So when we are resurfacing the main roads, and almost without exception, every main road in Oldham will be resurfaced as part of this programme, there'll be a 24-hour repair promise. What that means, very clearly, if you report a problem, it will be repaired within 24 hours guaranteed. That's a promise. And what we're saying is, if it's not, email me, email Councillor Hibbert, and we'll find out why, because the resources have been put in to make sure it's going to happen. Now, there's been a lot of creative work done to get the money together to be able to invest. Now, you would expect that resurfacing that number of roads all at once mean that there's a big bill that's attached to that. And I want to pay tribute in particular to our highways team, and in particular to Joanne Betts, who's our transportation officer. Joanne is a master at being able to pull in funding from all over the place. Today, we have £14 million of investment this year alone in our highway system from 11 different places, 11 different funding sources that officers of the council have worked hard to pull together. Now, that's the largest highway programme in Greater Manchester, without exception. It's interesting, that, isn't it? So we've got our issues, but we're really ambitious for making sure the basic services that people receive are right. And next year, we're going to continue. So the A62, right from Manchester, right for Oldham, through to the Pennines, will be resurfaced as well. We're spending £800,000 on retaining structures on bridges, on walls in Saddleworth to make sure that the structures are sound as well. It's not about surface treatment, it's about making sure that the bricks and mortar, the infrastructure that supports our borough is 100%. And people have noticed, Department for Transport, and we don't always give credit to government, have noticed that Oldham Council is doing something slightly different. So when they wanted to find out which council in England and Wales was doing the job properly, where did they come to? They came to Oldham. Government ministers coming to Oldham to see how Oldham is approaching getting the road network right. And as a result of that, we've got more money in the settlement than any other borough in Greater Manchester. So when the pothole money came, and the pavement and resurfacing money came, Oldham got far more, based on kilometres, based on geographical area, than anybody else, because they've seen that it was a wise investment. And I think actually that's really important, because the dependency between local and central government is such that you almost have to prove you're worse than everybody else to be able to get the money. The more deprived you are, the worse things are. If things are crumbling, then you're top of the list. Actually, I welcome an approach from government that says we're going to reward the councils that are doing the job properly and showing initiative. And I always hope that Oldham is at the front of that queue. You might have noticed that ITV's John Stapleton came to Oldham to see the work of the highways team, and he went out with two of our pothole repair gang, and I should give a name check to Jeff Munro and Peter Smith. They've been working on Oldham's highways for many, many years, and they took John Stapleton out on the rounds to show him how we repair our network. John admitted after that he was absolutely cream crackered, is what he said. He was so worn out with the pace that they had to go through to repair the borough's infrastructure. And let me just put this into numbers. So that team repairs 15,000 potholes every year. Can you imagine 15,000 potholes being repaired? They repair 27,000 square metres of highway, and they respond to 130 rapid response requests every month. It's quite a Herculean task. You wonder kind of what these people are on sometimes. And they use 14 tonnes of tarmac every day. 14 tonnes of tarmac every day is staggering when you think what that must do. And of course our £14 million investment is critical to that. Now let's just think about where we were and where we are now. In the 1990s, there was 140 staff in the highways team. 140. Today there's 33. That shows you how much the team has changed. But actually the new equipment, particularly that Councillor Hibbert has spearheaded, the jet patch machine, the injection, the tarmac into the potholes, has been really, really important to making sure that we can be more efficient. So where it used to take 20 minutes to repair a pothole, it actually takes 5 minutes now. And I think Councillor Hibbert, complete with a high vis, went out with a gang to see how it was done, and I know he was very impressed himself. But when the snow comes, our lads don't say, actually, job done, we can have a cup of tea at the depot now. They get the snow shovels out and they go out there and they clear the paths. They work with our first response unit, they work with our social workers to make sure that our vulnerable adults, our older people, can get the food, can get the prescription medicine they need, to make sure that they have a clear route and the GPs can get round and do what they need to do. So they are really, almost one of the hardest working highways team, I would argue, in the country. Not only is it a smaller team, it's a more efficient team, it's a Herculean team, and it's one that makes sure that our borough keeps on moving. And if you want to know when the snow comes, how the cash machines still have cash in, and how the supermarket can still sell milk and bread, it's because of these guys, because they make sure that the roads are clear, so that the transport can get round and we keep our borough moving. And you'll know from the recent press release that we've invested another £200,000 in road markings. I can't be the only one to drive around and wonder where they've all gone. I'm not sure where they have all gone. They seem to have disappeared overnight. But actually reinstating them are really important to show people that road safety is important for our borough. And I'm very pleased that we're able to use it for that purpose. Can I talk about street cleaning for a bit? It wouldn't be a council meeting without some reference to dog fouling. I've done potholes now, to talk about the work that our street cleaners do. Now actually these are the frontline staff, and I suspect quite a number of residents will know the local dandy operator better than they'll know the ward councillor, because it is a person that people pull up in the street and have a chat to, and people do know the first name generally of the person on that round. Well, to put that into numbers, so we clean 100,000 miles of streets every year. 100,000 miles of streets every year. We remove 4,000 tonnes of rubbish from Oldham, that's fly tip rubbish. And last year we cleaned 5,700 dumped waste, fly tipping. 5,700. Now, it does make you angry in a way that you're using taxpayers' money effectively to pay for people who should know better. Generally adults, generally people who haven't given a thought to the cleanliness of our borough. Now we pay for that. I actually wonder sometimes how disheartening must it be for some of our workers to continually go back to the same street over and over again every day. It feels a bit like Groundhog Day for some people, but they go on because they believe in public service and they take pride in what they do, and I think we owe them a great debt of gratitude as well. And I dread to think how many grass verges or acres that we mow and all the other stuff, but those are the services that people, I think, really respect. And when they see the frontline staff out there, they know that the council is doing a good job on their behalf. But actually we do more than that, and people often write into us to talk about the work that we do. Only this week actually we had a resident, Margaret, who moved from St Albans to Oldham after a period. She was born in Oldham, moved to St Albans, moved back, to say how delighted she was to come back to Oldham town centre and to see the condition that it was in. It was bright with the flowers out, it was well maintained and people feel safe there. And actually even small things like the play area where you see the children playing completely changes the nature of that space. It feels like it's a friendly, welcoming town now. And it wouldn't be particularly good to name neighbouring towns, but you'd have to go too far from Oldham to see where they're not getting it right, to recognise that in Oldham that actually we have got a story to tell. And if I could ask residents in Oldham to do one thing, it's really to talk the town up. We're not blind to the problems. We know there are issues, but do you know what? It's down for all of us in Oldham to really get behind the town and to do something about it together. And I know if we did that, nearly 250,000 people getting behind Project Oldham, imagine what we could achieve. It would be staggering. When we kind of embark as a council on deciding what our priorities are, we don't do it by locking ourselves away in a dark room. We ask people. It's quite interesting the number of people that have complained that the council is telephone canvassing people, asking what they think about council services and what's important to them. But we do that because we want to know. That if we don't ask, then we just don't know what the priorities are for people. And more importantly, not every part of Oldham is exactly the same. What's right for Saddleworth might not be right for Failsworth. What's required in Hathershaw might not be right for Chadderton even. So we know at a ward level by asking people what the priorities are there too. We've done plenty on fuel poverty. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because it can be a bit geeky and the projects can be a bit confusing because they've all got different names and or whatever. But it is important to bring it back to what it really means, and that's the difference it makes to lives in Oldham. And I wanted to pay reference to our Fuel Poverty campaign, where we've lifted 1,000 families this year out of poverty. 1,000 people better off because of this council, living in a warm home, not making the choice between food and heat, which I think is really important. And you may have read in the press, Alison Isaacs and her son Darryl, they moved into, they live in Fitton Hill, they had the home insulated as part of the scheme and a new boiler. And the son, who was very severely ill, now lives in a warm, safe home. And I think that's a human difference that we're all here to make, isn't it? We're not here about numbers, we're about the human impact that we know that makes. We've invested £400,000 into memory clinics because we know that dementia is a big issue in Oldham, and we know Debbie Abrahams has really raised this up the agenda locally as a very serious issue. An early beneficiary, a lady called Pamela, 63 years old, from Oldham, was very frightened when she was diagnosed. She wasn't sure where to go. Because the funding was put in place, she had the support around her to give her the confidence to get over what was a very, very difficult situation. Critical to what we want to do to Oldham as a place is to make sure that we have the strongest economic base possible. We don't want to be a town that's dependent on central government giving us handouts. We want to be able to pay our own way in life. And the way to do that is to build more homes and support businesses to trade and do better. That brings in income to the council in council tax and business rates, but it also creates jobs. We know for every £1 that's spent in Oldham, it generates another £4 in economic activity. So the £1 million for Yorkshire Street is about saying, if you want to set up a business in Oldham, then the council will get behind what you want to do. And already we've seen, you know, scoots, suits and boots. Often get those in the wrong order, but I'm sure that's right. We've seen hairdressers set up there. We've seen a Kashmiri bakery. And there's a waiting list of, get this, 70 inquiries for people who want to relocate as independents into Oldham. Fancy that? That small initiative. Now, £1 million is a lot of money. It's lottery money. You know, you can never imagine it in your own bank account. But actually, in terms of what the council spent over the last 10 years on regeneration projects in particular, that's actually a very small investment, a very small percentage of money we've invested. And it's usually Oldham residents who are setting up businesses. So it's a double benefit there as well. And, you know, I believe very strongly that we will develop a confident independence quarter from Oldham. I could talk about the Get Oldham Working project. We've got, you know, a very determined effort to try and get 2015 job opportunities, training opportunities, apprenticeships, self-employment opportunities off the ground. Well, I can report today that we've already created 1,100. So way before target, we're on with that. Now we need more jobs, and that's always a challenge, and that's why the physical regeneration, getting people to relocate and invest into Oldham is so critical. And again, you know, the human aspect of that. A girl called Shanice, she dropped out of her plan to go into college. Although she did have very good GCSEs, she was supported to be an apprentice in business administration. So she didn't know where she wanted to go. She wasn't sure about going to college and dropped out, and wasn't sure about what the future held. But because of the work of the Get Oldham team, she's now in an apprenticeship and got her eye on the future, which is very positive. And a young lad called Mohammed, he left training to be the man of the house when his father died. That young man could have been cut adrift by the community of Oldham, but we didn't do that. But the Get Oldham Working team is now an apprentice, and he's got an eye on a future career. So we didn't cut him adrift, and we are investing in him and hundreds of other people right across Oldham. And the youth guarantee that's going to come will mean that every 18-year-old, when they finish education, will have a guarantee of a job, training, self-employment, further education. That's unique. We're the only town, city in the country that will be saying to every young person in our town, you will not be left cut adrift. And I think that is really a mark. And what we want to say to people is, look, if you're willing to roll your sleeves up and you're willing to work hard, then this town will get behind you and give you the support that you need to do well. And it was some famous politician whose name escapes me that said, education, education, education. He said a few other things as well. But he was, you're right, the education chances, you only get one chance, and you only get usually one chance to get it right or to get it wrong. And if you get it wrong, you can set somebody up for a fall for the rest of their life. But if you get it right, that can be really inspiring for young people growing up. Our schools have made fantastic progress. But let me be clear, there are some schools in Oldham that are not performing anywhere near as good as they should be. And I'm not going to stand here as council leader and defend that, because it's not good enough. Because I can't explain to that young person why somebody in a neighbouring school who grew up in the same type of house with the same type of family did better than they did just because they happened to go to a different school. It's wrong. It shouldn't be a lottery. And we're going to make sure that the Education and Skills Commission that Estelle Morris is leading is not going to be a whitewash. It's not going to be a pat on the back and you're doing everything great. It will reflect on what we're doing well. But let's be clear, it will be a challenge to say to everybody in Oldham who's teaching our young people, actually, we all strive for excellence. And to be honest, there are too many people, usually the people in the middle, that are just left to tick along. And that's not good enough. Everybody should be able to realise their full potential and be what they want to be. And their social class, the estate they grow up on, should not determine their future. and that's a challenge for all of us. So let's see what that brings. But our Fair Employment Charter is as important as well, because it's not all about young people, it's about everybody in Oldham being able to benefit from a council that's ambitious. So the Fair Employment Charter is really important to say to people, actually, it's not about a job for job's sake. I believe in the power of work. I believe in what that does in terms of the psychological impact. I believe in what it does in terms of giving confidence to families and young children growing up as a role model to look up to. But it can't be right that people go out to work every day and they can barely earn enough to live, barely earn enough to pay the bills. They can't afford to pay the heating, to pay for a meal, making a judgment, particularly at this time of year, about whether they pay for a school uniform or pay for the transport to get to work, or they have to walk miles themselves or present to a food bank even. And there's something instinctively wrong about a country where if you are willing to work hard, you can't afford to live. For too many people, that's Britain today. For too many people, that's Oldham today, and it's not good enough at all. So our living wage, a proper contract so that you can get a mortgage or get secured rent in a decent place, is absolutely essential as part of that. And their employer benefits as well. We know that where employers treat their employees in the right way, employees almost certainly will reward that with loyalty and hard work and dedication too. So I hope that you've seen a snapshot of what we're doing on basic services, on highways, on street cleaning, on the near 100,000 wheeler bins that we collect every week in Oldham, to our adult social care, to our education, to investing in the infrastructure that will create the jobs for the people of Oldham. And I haven't even touched on the number of homes that are being built, or what we're doing as a council in other areas, because there just isn't the time to do that. The full annual report is available on the blog on the council's website, and people can read it there. But more importantly, use it to hold us to account. Because we are a democratic function, we are here to represent our community, and we should be held to account on our word. I can commit that this council will continue to strive for excellent basic services, but I would ask people to think about what they can do as well. We cannot meet the financial challenge alone. There is absolutely no way we can take another £60 million out of the council's budget and for things to be business as usual at the end of all that. That's just the cruelty of where we are. But actually, that should create an urgency in Oldham as a community to say, we need to do things differently. We need to think about what a cooperative Oldham genuinely is. It can't be, as a council, we say, because our money's been cut, it's not our problem anymore, so you have to do it yourself. That's no more cooperative than a member of the public saying, that's what I pay my council tax for, get on with it. I'll drop litter if I want to, I pay the wages of the street cleaner. Neither is right, and neither is in the spirit of what we're trying to do. The Cooperative Council and the Cooperative Oldham is that we are part and parcel of the same community. And by working together, we can achieve far more than we can hope to achieve alone. And they're the values that we hold as a political party, but they're also the values that we hope people in Oldham share too. And some very practical examples as well. Probably need to make this a bit real for people. In terms of a cut, the equivalent is £2,333 per household in Oldham. Imagine that, over £2,000 per household in Oldham cut from this council's budget by central government. Most people didn't even believe that we got any more than their council tax, but that's the scale of reductions that we've got. Now, what can we do? Call to arms. First of all, talk Oldham up, okay? Oldham is not perfect. We are not a utopia. We are not a place that is gold-plated and where we have no problems. There are issues, and we're on with tackling those. But I tell you what, this is a fantastic community. The people of Oldham are our heartbeat. The work that they put in means that we are one of the strongest communities, I believe, in this country. And we should never let anybody break that or take it away from us. We should never allow people outside or inside to talk us down. Let's all, because we're all choosing to be here, raise our family here, have our future here. Let's invest in the town, the energy that we've got, not to be negative or to be cynical, although, let's be honest, people might have the right to be that way. Let's really invest our passion and enthusiasm for saying that Oldham can be better tomorrow than it is today. And if people just did a bit more, if people checked on their elderly neighbour, if people considered fostering an adoption, not only do you change a little life, well, actually that does save money as well. You know, they're the hard numbers of public service. But you could really change your life on some of that. If you recycle right and recycle often, that will save the council nearly £5 million a year. You know, that would keep every library in Oldham open, just if people remember to recycle in the right bin. So these are, you know, there are always choices, but as a community, let's not be forced to make the choices we don't want to make, because the things that we should all be doing together is a missed opportunity. And Councillor Brown just mentioned this before, but I do need to say it is very frustrating. It's very soul-destroying for council staff, for people.
Extend the time, Jim.
And yeah,
extension.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll wrap up. And of course for frontline staff and for residents to see the amount of litter that's in Oldham. I can drive down some streets in Oldham where the street cleaner's been down there in the morning, and in the afternoon it will be full of litter. Now, that's not the council's fault. We don't send people out wearing a council lanyard dropping litter all over the street to justify our own existence. We don't want to do that. We could be doing other things to benefit the community. We need to challenge that. People must see it going on, report them, and we'll find them. I tell you what we could do with the money. So if we're going to issue a fixed penalty notice on somebody fly tipping or dropping litter, we'll be there in a shot. And let's work together as a community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. And that takes us on to item number 9, outstanding business from previous meeting. There's one item of outstanding business. I call on Councillor Heffernan to move and Councillor Murphy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the motion as printed. Oldham has recently been advertising smaller sites over the borough for sale to developers, and yet we have a waiting list for people who would like allotments. There are only 431 allotment sites available in Oldham. It's nowhere near enough to meet the demand. What actions have the council taken to identify new sites and start the business of ensuring that those sites will be available soon? We in Saddleworth know how long these proceedings can take. Land near the river and canal is still not ready for use several years after it was identified and funding arranged. We need allotments. They do good. They get people out. As a country, we're facing a problem of obesity. It is every day in the national press. Comment today about a lady who died. She was 29 stone. Now, I don't think there's 10 people in this country who are that by nature. They're that size because of obesity and because they're not getting enough exercise. Can I say, when I talk about allotment, I was a total failure on one. I put £7 of seed potatoes in and got £3 of potatoes out. So I'm not looking for one. I do a bit in the back. It was the enlightened attitude of a few wealthy people, including reformers such as William Cobbett, who recognised the value of allotments for people suffering economic stress in the late 18th century and the early 19th. I don't have to spell out the realities, the economic realities of that time. Oldham suffered them more than most. Oldham at that time was desperately poor. People didn't have enough to eat. They certainly didn't have good, fresh food to eat. One way they could get that was having an allotment. Today, we also recognise the value of allotments in providing that healthy lifestyle, fresh air, physical effort, and the joy of eating your own produced fruit and vegetables. No bland flavours, no carbon footprint, they're not supermarket foodstuffs. Children can be encouraged to join in. A messed up corner of an allotment isn't mum's lawn. And I'll tell you what, You take the watering can and start going down a row of fruit or veg or flowers, and behind you will be a little person with a small watering can copying you, and they then are learning. Some years ago there was a granddad who lived near to me, and his grandson went from knowing absolutely nothing about gardening. Their house had a lawn, that was it. He went with Grandad and he could produce enough food in his part of the allotment to feed his parents and siblings for a month. He learned from nothing, just by going along for Grandad. The very best vegetables you'll have on your Sunday dinner will come out of your own garden. I said I failed with an allotment. I grow a little bit at the back of my house, and I can tell you that last weekend we had homegrown new potatoes and they were absolutely delicious. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will draw to a close, but I must just ask, the last sentence of the motion refers to National Allotments Week, which was ahead when the motion was put in. The 4th to the 10th of August has now passed, but we should still be promoting the virtual allotment through the rest of this year, the coming year, and the next National Allotments Week. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Murphy, to second the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I rise to second the motion as printed. What has Tom and Barbara Good from The Good Life got in common with me dad? The answer is they both love being on the allotment, and so do a lot of green-fingered would-be people out there in Oldham. My dad loved being on the allotment, growing his own food, sharing it with the neighbours, and I dare say escaping from my mum for a couple of hours. Over recent years, there has been a rise in grow-your-own gardening as we increasingly appreciate both the health and environmental benefits that come with growing food locally. Fresh fruit and veg organically grown can be so expensive. It's all right eating healthily, but everything has its price. At the moment, there are around 20 allotment schemes in Oldham, ranging from small ones on Hope Street Shore to the grassroots community allotment on the Rochdale Canal, which helps people with disabilities to engage in horticultural and animal welfare. We need to have a wide range of different styles of allotments. In some areas like Salford, they've come up with some uses for alleyways behind people's properties. Together with groundwork, they have enabled people to source good, healthy, locally grown food for them and their families, while helping them develop the skills they need to grow, cook and enjoy fruit and vegetables. I'm going to struggle supporting Labour's amendment. Delete statutory status for current future allotments that it manages under Section 8 of the Allotments Act 1925. Statutory status gives a further safeguard that local authority must seek permission from the Secretary of State before selling or changing the use of a statutory site. So, for clarification, the administration would like to support the motion, but in the next breath, remove the only safeguard protecting potential allotment users. Who's going to take on a new allotment Murphy, without a guarantee of tenure?
You're seconding the motion, I take it?
Yeah.
But you're not... Can you stick to the motion, please?
All right, fair enough. Mr. Mayor, if you'll excuse the pun, people plough a lot of time and energy into the allotments. The work can take weeks, months and years, but yet the amendment would like to see all that destroyed in the stroke of a pen.
Councillor Murphy, can we stick to the original motion, please?
I ask Council to please support the motion as printed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Can I call on Councillor Wrigglesworth to move and Councillor Jabbar to second the amendment now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We actually support allotments as well. In fact, I'm very pleased to say that in South Chadderton we have 2 allotment sites, one of which the local ward councillors helped to develop and helped to get money for a licence for. We support the allotment open days, which, as you said, have now gone. And in fact, we went to our local allotment open day 2 weeks ago, and Dave is still eating his way through the mountain of rhubarb we brought home with us. The reason I want to actually bring this amendment is, and it isn't actually a scare story, the amendment at all. All we're saying is that we don't want to actually make it a statutory duty. The reason for this are threefold. Allotments already have protection. They're leaseholders and they have 25-year leases. So therefore, when you say it takes a lot of hard work and we can turf people out tomorrow, it just isn't true. They do have a lease. Secondly, I think it's quite short-sighted to actually try and foresee what's going to happen in this borough in many years to come. I would not like to tie a council 50 years hence to a policy that we've made tonight. We don't know what's going to happen. And the third reason is that I like to see local powers kept local. I don't want a local power to go to the vagaries of a Secretary of State. The current one I wouldn't like to see make any decision whatsoever in Oldham, and that's why I'm supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Rickles. Can I have Jabbar to second the amendment, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to echo what Councillor Rickles said, this administration is very clear. We support allotments. We want to see further development of allotment in this borough. I agree with most of the things Derek has said in his opening speech. I think they do provide very useful exercise for people in allotments. It helps to produce locally grown vegetable and foods. It is important not only because it is cheap, but also it's fresh, and actually there is a very important environmental benefit as well, because locally produced food actually have less carbon emission than fruits or vegetable if you import them or actually have them transported across the country. So we have no issue in that. I think what would have been really useful is both the proposer and the seconder of this motion, if they did a little bit of research to find out what's actually happening on the ground. We have something like 19 sites in Oldham for allotments. All of them currently have 25 years lease granted in 2009. So they still have 20 years lease to go before they are up for negotiation. Now, these are protected leases with allotment societies, so they can't be changed over. So what Councillor Murphy says is actually not correct. They have got protection within the current lease arrangement. Now, if you actually look what we're doing, as part of the cooperative manner in which we work, we are actually working very closely with the allotment societies in the borough to make sure those are managed properly and we facilitate any request they make. I'm also, as the portfolio holder for Asset, Mr. Mayor, in discussion with St. Hugh's School, Church of England School in Alexandra Ward, where they have come together with the community to ask for an allotments to be developed there. Now we've got to go through a number of regulation checks and approval, but I'm minded to approve that. And I think I would say to Councillor Heffernan and Councillor Murphy, now if you got some allotment land in your area, please come forward, because we want to support them. But you're not going to gain anything by giving the power away to the Secretary of State. That is not the way to do it. I am genuine, and this administration is genuine, when we say we'll work with you. If you've got suitable land in your neighbourhood, in your area, which is good for allotments, then please come talk to us, and we will support that for all the right reasons. But please accept it from me. It is not the right thing to do, to give local powers to the Secretary of State, to say, well, this is the act that you refer to, in 1925, this was when it came through. This is dated, it's an old act. we have come and developed a better and modern way of dealing with allotments. And the way to do that is to talk to the local community, talk to the ward councillors, and come and, if there is a need, we will support that. And this is part of our cooperative council. And that's the way to do it. And that's why we have not substantially changed the spirit of the motion. We have just deleted this statutory requirement. So I ask everyone, please, we are very genuine when we talk about this, to support this amendment. We are not destroying or deleting the spirit of what you say in your amendments. Mr. Mayor, I ask everyone to support the amendment. Thank you.
I ask you to sit down. You're out of time. Thank you for that, Councillor Jabbar. We are running out of time on this one. So due to the time constraint, I'm going to ask Councillor Heffernan if he wishes to reply, but be very brief, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief. I can't accept the amendment. You've actually given good reason not to. You referred to the 50 years ahead. If we'd looked 50 years ahead after the Second World War, when we had a lot of land around for dig for victory, we wouldn't have this problem now. And I did research the sites and the protected leases. I still think that we need more, and I would ask you to move for the motion as published and not as would be amended. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Heffernan, for being brief. Can I now ask Councillor Wrigglesworth if she wishes to reply? Brief again, please.
No, I'll just say I would like you to support the amendment for the reasons that myself and Councillor Jabbar have given. Thank you.
Okay, if that's the case. Does Council agree the amendment? Those in favour? Those against? The amendment is carried. I'm sorry, I did miss the abstentions, but I didn't notice anybody not putting their hand up or down. Does any member wish to speak on the substantive original motion? Okay, stay that back. You've no time. You have no time on that. Can we, those in favour of the original motion?
No. Does the council agree the motion as amended?
Okay, so I'm getting confused here now. Okay, does the council agree the motion
as amended?
As amended. So those in favour, you can see. Those against? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Thank you. I don't have any youth council business tonight. The next section is leader and cabinet member question time. The last 8 minutes of this section will be reserved for observations on responses received and responses to those observations. You're trying to do your best. The leader of the opposition will ask his questions. Councillor Sykes? If you've not got any, that's great.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I can congratulate the leader on his statement. Well done, Jim. My first question, a serious matter, is about Rotherham and child protection, and it concerns the tragic details revealed in the recent independent report commissioned by Rotherham Council about the failure of children's services and other agencies in the local authority to address child sexual exploitation over many years. Professor Alexi Jay's independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Rotherham covered the period 1997 to 2013 and found there was a lack of scrutiny and challenge, a chronic failure of senior councillors, staff members and police officers to engage with the problem, and an inability of both councillors and the local safeguarding board to monitor and challenge practices within the council. While the report focuses only on the failures of agencies in Rotherham, previous cases show that these problems are not exclusive to one area and that every local authority needs to learn lessons from the report and to assure its own services conform to best practices. The leader will recall that immediately following the publication of Professor Jay's report, I wrote to both the Chief Executive and himself seeking a reassurance that Oldham Council will be conducting its own review in the light of those findings. I am pleased that the prompt response I received contains such an assurance. This is not an issue I want to make political capital out of, and so I want to state for the record that the Liberal Democrat group will be fully supportive of such a review. But for the information of all councillors in this chamber and many concerned citizens who have been listening and watching these proceedings tonight and as they've unveiled on the television since the report was published, I would like to ask the leader when and how the council will be conducting this review and when we might expect to receive those findings. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. Can I ask the leader to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Sykes for his first question. This is a very traumatic issue for the victims who were abused in Rotherham, and the failures of Rotherham Council, the police, other professionals and, to be honest, some members of the community in allowing that to go on for far longer than it should have done was a failure and a severe letdown to the victims and the wider community. What I don't want to do, because I think there are too many people that do this, is to obtain a degree in hindsight by trying to grandstand on an issue after the fact. And to be honest, I think it's been fairly shameful the number of MPs that have lined up of self-qualified experts on child sexual exploitation, when very clearly from the material that they've wrote, they have very little idea what this form of child abuse actually is and just how complex it is. There is no doubt at all that Rotherham Council failed and that Rotherham Council needs to be held to account for those failures. What people will always ask is, well, what does that mean for my own town? And what does it mean for Oldham? I want to start off by saying that we aim to be an open and transparent council. We haven't got anything to hide on this. That doesn't mean we're reckless and we make insightful statements just to get headlines. We don't do that. We tackle things in a very measured, proportionate and appropriate way. And I know that members in the chamber would agree that's the right course of action. Mr. Mayor, this is a time-limited response, but if the chamber was in agreement, I would like to explain just a bit about what this form of child sexual exploitation is, just to be clear about what it is and what it isn't.
It's up to the members. Agreed? Carry on, Jim.
There were elements of the Rotherham report that make all of us question how could that be allowed to happen. So there was, and now I'm going to take this straight on, there was a criticism that the council was fearful, complicit in hiding the abuse that was going on because they were fearful of the community cohesion impact. And the reason? Because it was predominantly Asian perpetrators on predominantly white girls. They thought, if we tell people about this, the impact is going to be damaging to community cohesion. Actually, the opposite is true. If you don't tackle something like this and be clear that paedophiles are paedophiles, whatever the colour of their skin, and should be brought to justice, then you allow a community to be tarnished. You allow a situation where authorities are accused of cover-up and where people like North West Infidels, the EDL, other far-right groups come to town with banners that read, Asians are abusing our white girls, because that's what they did in Rochdale and it's what they've done in other towns too. And we do no justice to any community if we don't give the proportionate, the honest and the right response, because we allow it to be a polarised debate. You have a debate where people are so fearful of it being a debate, they try and cover it up. And you have other people that are trying to make political capital out of it because they are racist, who want to use it to slur and tar a whole community. Well, be clear, this particular pattern of child abuse, it's a fact that the majority of perpetrators are Asian males, and it is a fact that the majority of victims are white girls. But it's not exclusively the case. So it's not exclusively that all the perpetrators are Asian, because they're not. And it's not exclusively that all the victims are white girls, because they're not. There are Asian girls who are potentially at risk, and there are boys who are at risk, because these are paedophiles, they're abusers. And if they can find any way of getting to people who they perceive as easy prey, then they'll do it. And we need to be clear about that. But this is a very narrow form of abuse and grooming, and it is by no way representative of our wider safeguarding issues as a town. And let me give you an insight. We have many hundreds of young children that are unfortunately on our child protection register. Now, most of those young people will be on there because they're at risk from their own parents or family members. You're still far more likely to be abused by a member of your family or a close associate than you are by somebody picking you up through that particular form of grooming that was made, the papers in Rotherham. That's one thing. The other thing is we have a bigger issue as a town with white men on the internet attempting to groom young boys and girls than we do with this particular form of abuse. So in the context of abuse that goes on, it's a very particular form of it. And it's nasty, but it's not a race issue. We allow it to be a race issue if we try and defend it for the wrong reasons. Be very clear, these are paedophiles. It makes no difference what their race, religion or colour of skin is. It's everybody's responsibility to find them and to bring them to justice. And in Oldham, that's the view that we take. The other thing is, and let's be honest, they were obviously targeted by groomers, because that's what groomers do. They're very clever. They have a pattern. They know how to get victims trapped. But they were let down by professionals as well. And I question whether or not there's almost a middle-class professional prejudice against some white working-class girls. There is a view, because of the background of some of these girls, because some of them might have had criminal records, because they might have lived in chaotic households, or the family might have had a reputation, that was a reason almost to explain away the abuse that was taking place. Or even to say they were making a conscious decision to be in that, because of course grooming means you find a way of making the other person dependent on the relationship. So it's very easy in that to convince the victim that you're the boyfriend. The fact it's a completely abusive relationship and you're using that for other reasons, in that dependent relationship is very, very difficult. It causes a massive amount of psychological harm. And we see that in abuse. We've seen it most recently in the Catholic Church. We've seen it very recently in the celebrities that have found their way in front of the court as well. And that's not a race issue. Should the council come out on every issue that's raised, because that's the other view, you won't make a public statement around this because you're scared of it or whatever. Well, first of all, we'll never do anything that compromises an ongoing police investigation, because our absolute end goal is to bring to justice the people who are abusing people in Oldham. So we will never do anything that compromises that. And you have to make a judgment about when is the right time to release a statement or not. The other thing is, actually, we're not asked to make statements when white people are convicted. If you look at the Chronicle over the last couple of weeks and look at people who have been charged or are due to go to court for child abuse or for downloading child pornography, actually there were 2 white males last week, but the council wasn't asked to make a statement on that. And we have to be absolutely clear that whatever we do is proportionate, it's transparent, and it's about getting the right justice for the victims. It's not about grandstanding. It's not about appealing to the headline of the day. And I think actually the approach that we take here is right. But in terms of the way professionals approach it, we're very clear in Oldham, and we've asked this question a number of times. It doesn't matter what the background of the victim is. It doesn't matter whether there's a concern about whether they're going to be a reliable witness or not. If there is any sense that they're being abused, or likely to be abused, then they're treated as a victim, and we don't explain away the circumstances surrounding it. And that's a cultural change that unfortunately did not exist in Rotherham and didn't exist in other places as well. Can I give some numbers on this, because it is important that we're transparent. In Oldham, we have around 77 young people who are have been identified either because they are current victims or because they potentially could be victims if they're moving in social circles where they could be brought through. 23 of those are open and they're in high-risk category. 22 are in need of planning, and 32 are where we believe they could, if intervention isn't made, be a potential victim of the future. And then my final bit, there's actually quite a lot we need to do to get true equality in this country, and to make women feel as though actually this isn't normal and it's not right that they should be treated in a certain way, or that society determines they should be treated in a certain way. And I think one of our major the things that we are proud of is that we don't just tackle the victims when they present, we're proactive. So we have the play that goes around every one of our secondary schools that is very open about teaching people what the patterns of abuse are. And that's not just this form of abuse, it's also relationship abuse. And that's physical, it's emotional, it's financial. So they understand what a healthy relationship is and what a risky relationship is. Now that's paying dividends. Young people are involved in that, and that's very positive. And the other thing is that we identify people who could be victims and make sure that we give them the support to make sure that as much as is possible, they're not. But this is not easy. And as a council, let's reflect, we are representing a town of near 250,000 people. And in that mix, there will be some very bad, nasty and devious people. We do the best we can do to have the right policies in place, the right procedures in place, and to make sure that the culture exists where we always strive for the best deal for those who are at risk.
Thank you, Jim. Howard, I'm not encouraging you. Have you got another question?
I'll make up time in the next
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank the leader for his reassurance. Like I say, I meant what I sent in the question about working together on this. These people are evil, and we need to shine bright lights on every single corner that they inhabit, and minimise and reduce and remove the risk to some very vulnerable people we have in our borough. The second question I'd like to ask is about community health champions. As a local authority and employer, we have statutory duties to promote public health and health and safety of our employees, and this should extend to them providing them with advice and support to adopt healthy lifestyle and choices and address behaviour that may damage their health. Here I make a particular reference to smoking, an issue of great concern, I'm sure, to councillors of all parties, and I noticed recently Ash have reported that smoking costs Oldham around £2.7 million a year. Smoking is a harbinger of death, chronic illnesses, particular problem in our borough. It's a particular problem for our local authority. And in terms of our employees, it gives to greater absenteeism, a potential loss of productivity, and both of those have a financial impact, which we talked about earlier tonight. Therefore, it's in all our self-interest to reduce the prevalence of smoking in our own workforce. The NHS improvement team is now recruiting what they call community health champions in workplaces to promote healthy lifestyle choices to co-workers and to address behaviour that can lead to ill health, such as smoking, but not exclusively. The Council has established an employee-supported volunteering scheme, and I'm convinced that this represents an excellent mechanism to recruit employees from all sections of the Council to train as community health champions. I believe the Council should establish a programme of work for these volunteers with measured targets monitored by the team of the Director of Public Health, covering, shall we say, initially the period to the National No Tobacco Day, which is the 31st of May 2015. Will the leader agree to look at and take this proposal forward?
Councillor McMahon to respond.
Can I thank Councillor Sykes for his second question? The answer is yes.
So sweet. Councillor Sykes, third question, please.
Thank you. My third question is about honouring the Great War heroes. That's the heroes of the Great War. And it's in recognition of 3 local men who in the First World War won Britain's highest military award, the Victoria Cross. I'm sure the leader will recall correspondence that received last year from my colleague John, requesting that local streets be named after local heroes. One of the few things local community secretary Rick Pickles has done I agree with is his commissioned commemorative paving stones to be laid as a mark of honour and remembrance in the locality of every Great War VC winner, and there's one of them on a thing in the Mayor's office if you've been past recently. In announcing that initiative, Mr Pickles said it's our duty to remember the British and Commonwealth troops who lost their lives fighting in the Great War, and we're determined to make sure their bravery for king and country is not forgotten. Sentiments I'm sure the leader and councillors will endorse. 3 paving stones we've received are for local heroes John Hogan of Royton, Walter Mills of Oldham and Thomas Steele of Spring Head. Lest we forget their heroic deeds, please let me give you just a very brief summary. Sergeant John Hogan of the 2nd Battalion Manchester Regiment received his VC from King George V in 1915. He was awarded the VC for recapturing a trench near Fusbert, I hope that's pronounced right, in October 1914. Private Walter Mills was awarded a VC posthumously after he was caught in a gas attack on the Western Front in December 1917. Despite being gassed, a truly horrible fate, he remained at his post alone throwing grenades until the enemy retreated. And thirdly, but not finally, Private Thomas Steele served with the 1st Battalion Seaforth Highlanders in Mesopotamia, better known as Iraq now. He was awarded his VC for action in January 1917 when he helped a comrade carry a machine gun into position under heavy fire. Can I ask the leader if he and Councillor Ball will agree to work with me and Councillor McCann and other ward members to identify new developments where these gallant men may have local streets or other suitable developments or buildings named after them? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Sykes for his third question? I won't be flippant and just say yes, but the answer is yes, and we'll arrange that meeting.
Excellent. Can I call on Councillor Hudson to ask a question, if he has one?
I do, Mr Mayor, but it's not quite as long as what happened before. With regard to the leader's wish that we talk up the Metropolitan Borough, I do agree, and I tried to do that during my mayoral year. Whether it was a success is for other people to judge, but I do think that with this in mind and the question we had earlier on about Hotel Future, what I'd like is that talking up the Berry is great, but we've also got to make sure we keep everybody informed. And what I'd like to ask Councillor McMahon is that with this in mind, because of the negativity coming from some of the projects which I consider to be part of the success of the way Oldham is now going, and I've been proud to be able to sell that message to people because I know they are happy with it, would he sort out so that we can have some sort of progress report to councillors on what's going to happen with regard to the Queen Elizabeth Hall and this council chamber. It's gone on for a long time, but it's fragmented, and the problem is when you get questions raised like earlier this evening, I'm a little bit worried personally that it will puncture some of that progress we're making in selling the message. So I'd like to ask the leader if he could stop the hemorrhaging straight away by making sure there is some form of progress report to everybody, including backbenchers like myself, so that we know what the picture is and we know what kind of response we can give in order to keep talking up the Metropolitan Borough of Oldham. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Can I thank Councillor Hudson for his question, and can I congratulate him on his mayoral year, which was a success, John, and you did a very good job at being an ambassador for our borough. You're quite right, the projects that were laid out as our, if you like, foundation projects to rebuild Oldham are important to people, and people want to know where they're up to. We've developed a section on the council website that provides a project update on each one of those projects, and we're just in the process now of reviewing those and bringing them up to date. We'll also make sure, John, if it's of any help, if you want a one-to-one meeting and we'll just talk through the individual projects, we're very happy to arrange that too.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Can I call on Councillor Klonski? Am I pronouncing that right? If you've got a question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several constituents from my ward have voiced their concerns to me regarding the recent tensions in Athershaw between local residents and people recently arrived from Eastern Europe. They're aware that extra resources have been expended in the area on policing, social and environmental services, etc. In light of cuts in the council budgets, they would like to get answers for the following questions, please. How much of their council tax has been diverted to provide these additional services? Have or will services elsewhere because as a result of the extra resources for Athershaw? And how much does the council anticipate spending this financial year to resolve the problems that have arisen in Athershaw and surrounding areas? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Can I thank Councillor Klonski for his question? Is it me that finds it slightly odd that a member with Polish ancestry asked a council leader with Irish ancestry an issue on immigration into Oldham? But, you know, let's say we're an open council, so let's try and answer it. There is no doubt that there are issues in Hathershaw, but the issues aren't that people from Eastern Europe are a problem as a community. The issue is that there are one or two people in Hathershaw who don't respect our town, who don't, if you like, conform to what our acceptable standards are, and who let the community down. I could take you to different parts of Oldham and I could show you the same image of streets that have been left with litter, of fly tipping that's been left in alleyways, and where people aren't treating their neighbours with respect. But I can say that won't be one particular community. What it does spark, and you know, you've kind of fell into the trap of the textbook UKIP question, is whether immigration is good or bad and how immigration is managed, and what does that do to communities that are in change. And I do think that is a legitimate debate that actually every town and city should have, because it is a very difficult, complex issue, and when it goes wrong, it usually goes significantly wrong. Let's be honest, as a country, we need to make our mind up what immigration system we want. Either we want a very liberal, open-door immigration system, which is fine, and we all take the arguments about the richness of diversity and the cultural benefits that we derive from that, and of course getting new skills into the country as well. But you can only do that if you've got the infrastructure and public services on housing, jobs and education that supports it. Because if you end up in a situation where towns and cities are effectively poor people fighting against poor people for limited housing, limited jobs, and limited opportunities, then you will always get community tensions that will exist as part of that. But let's not blame people that have taken a life-changing decision to make a better life for themselves and the family, and it is life-changing. Can you imagine the difficulty of
move extension? Agreed.
The difficulty of making that decision to uproot your entire family, to move to a country that is alien to you in the search of work and a better life? Oldham was built on that. Our town, there's not many people in this council chamber that say they can trace their ancestry back to Oldham from day one, because it went from 14,000 people to 250,000 people in the Industrial Revolution. So we are a town of incomers. But we're rich because of that, not poorer. The real issue is that the investment in Oldham has been failing for decades. Manufacturing in Britain has been failing for decades, and governments have not had an answer for, you know, declining manufacturing bases and what a new economy might look like. So people are generally fighting for low-paid, insecure work, and that's a scandal for everybody. So if we want to have a talk about immigration, which I think is a substantive point that's being raised, then we can have it, but we probably need to accept that quite a lot of that is outside of our control. What we can do and what is inside of our control is what goes on in Oldham. So let's not alienate people or say you're not an Oldhamer, because my view is, on day one, when you come here, you're an Oldhamer. You do your bit, you take part in the community and you're welcomed, and if you don't, then you're held to account. Let's have that conversation. And if we do that, it's not divisive, and hopefully Oldham as a community will be stronger for it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McMahon. Since we're in the last minutes of this section, does any member have any observation on the responses received? No? Okay. In that case, then we'll probably have enough time for another question. Yep, I've had an advance notice of question. I call on Councillor Ball to ask the question.
Under new proposals, the coalition government planned to let people who don't hold minicab licences drive one when it's off duty, end the annual checks on drivers' licences, and allow minicab firms to subcontract bookings to firms in other areas without giving local councillors the power that they need to enforce these out-of-area minicabs. How does the Cabinet member feel that these will affect the residents of the town?
Councillor Hibbert to respond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, thank you, Councillor Ball, for the question. The measures outlined in the question have been placed before Parliament as an amendment to the deregulation bill currently before the House of Lords. We view these proposed changes to hackney carriage and private hire licensing to be ill thought out and against the spirit of the legislation, which is there to protect public safety. In relation to subcontracting, no additional powers will be given to the licensing officers, and again this amendment has not been thought through properly. Finally, allowing a person who is not vetted and licensed to drive a private hire vehicle is a massive safety fear and should not be allowed to enter the statute book. The bill enters the House of Lords, the bill enters Parliament just a moment. I cannot understand why the government cannot wait until the draft taxis and private hire vehicles bill enters Parliament, hopefully next year. I urge elected members who share our concerns across the country to contact MPs and Lords as soon as possible in order to have these proposals removed from the bill. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hibbert. I think we can just about get this one in. I call on Councillor Raymond to ask the question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Institute for Fiscal Studies and the Institute of Education have written a report which can be viewed on the IFS website on attainment of disadvantaged pupils in schools in inner city London and larger cities such as Birmingham achieving better GCSE results than the rest of the country. This has been put down to better prior attainment at Key Stage 2, which the report has found to be due to better recruitment in teachers and competition between schools in London. Please can the Cabinet member tell us what we are doing to improve our Key Stage 2 attainment for disadvantaged pupils? And also, compared to the national average, how is Oldham performing in terms of disadvantaged pupils at Key Stage 4?
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. I've got McMahon, Jean, Councillor Stratton.
In the Cabinet member's absence, I would like to thank Councillor Raymond for his question and also to thank him for his patience, because in waiting for the answer, as he first tabled it for the previous council meeting and it was run out of time. A disadvantaged 11-year-old in Oldham has a significantly better chance of reaching expected levels by the time they leave primary school than their peers elsewhere in the country. In 2013, 67% managed this in Oldham against 64% nationally. This year, Oldham's figure rose to 72%. By the time they are 16, however, disadvantaged children's chances of reaching expected levels are lower than both nationally and locally. Oldham's figures are only very slightly better than national ones by this age. The key priority in Oldham is therefore to increase the progress that disadvantaged pupils make in our secondary schools and academies. National figures for gaps in attainment are extremely poor. These gaps are slightly smaller in Oldham, but the Oldham Council target is for these gaps to be entirely eliminated. To this end, the Council annually provides every school and academy with a data analysis pack that highlights the free school meals attainment gap in the school. This pack is used as the basis of challenge to schools where the gap is large or not reducing. The Council has commissioned a local outstanding school to provide an external review of the use and impact of pupil premium in schools, providing them with support in improving the progress of children eligible for this grant. As raising performance in the secondary sector is a priority, almost all of our secondary schools and academies has an achievement partner provided by the Council whose role includes this challenge. Primary schools judged to require improvement by Ofsted also have this facility. Many of such schools have additional support from higher achieving schools funded or brokered for them by the Council. Pupil premium training has also been held for school governors. In addition, the Council has a number of initiatives to improve the attendance of previously free school meal pupils, which is significantly worse than those of non-free school meal children, in order to support their improved progress. These initiatives are detailed in the Council's Closing the Gap strategy, which will be shortly subject to consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Stratton. Now we're out of time, so we're going to be moving on to item number 12. I call on Councillor McMahon to move and Councillor Stratton to second that Council notes the minutes of the Cabinet as circulated. Following agreement of full Council, the last 8 minutes of this section will be reserved for observations on responses received and responses to those observations. Time limit, 1 minute per observation. Do any members of the Council who are not Cabinet members have a question on the minutes? That might be a good idea. But at best. So can you move? Who's the second? Thank you. Not with it tonight for some reason. Do any members of the Council who are not Cabinet members have a question on the minutes? Councillor Sykes?
Yes, briefly, Mr Mayor. Welcome on page 44, the award of the contract for the school expansion at East Crumpton St George's, long overdue. Could I ask the relevant Cabinet member what other proposals there are to expand the number of primary school places within the catchment of Shaw and Crumpton? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes.
Councillor Chatterton isn't here to answer that in detail, but we can certainly make sure that a briefing note is prepared and circulated to all members.
Is that okay, Councillor Sykes? Thank you. Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In a way, the question's been brought up twice before, but I've got a slightly different slant, Mr Mayor. And it actually concerns the Cabinet member of the 21st of July, pages 45, item 13, and page 47, item 19, about Hotel Future. I don't have a problem with an item being withdrawn from an agenda so that further information, proper project management, evaluation and the finances can be further evaluated and put in place. So we suggested last year that actually where large schemes such as this are delayed for perhaps appropriate re-evaluation, are we going to go ahead with Hotel Future? Is the original projection now possible? There's a large sum of money involved, so I agree, Mr Mayor, that it should be reviewed and has got to be project managed very carefully. So basically, my concerns were that, as I mentioned last year, the financial background and package for this scheme is still intact. It is still viable for Oldham, and it will still have a beneficial effect on the town and not leave us with
a white elephant or a white hotel, because actually, does the council want to manage a hotel? We may want to facilitate, we may want to bring them forwards, but I'll be grateful for any further explanation or confirmation that actually this is a serious look at what is a massive investment for this town.
Thank you. Can I ask the relevant member to respond?
Can I thank Councillor McCann for the question on the minutes? Well, in some ways, the case has been made, John, by the way you asked the question, which is we have a responsibility to get value for money for the taxpayer of Oldham. We have a responsibility to make sure that what is put there is a viable and sustainable option, and that the council isn't going to enter into a scheme that is so risky that the council, as you quite rightly point out, might end up running a hotel. What we're trying to achieve on this site is a redevelopment of the site that provides a refurbishment of the QE Hall to provide a modern conferencing facility that we believe will be a regional conferencing facility, and with that a hotel, because we know, particularly in terms of the tourism economy, that's already worth over £200 million to Oldham, supports a great number of jobs in the town. We know that by an overnight stay, we can significantly increase the amount of economic return to the town. So there's been a number of reports on feasibilities that have been undertaken. The first one is about the financial benefit to the local economy, and that is almost kind of uncompromisingly positive, which is by doing this, it acts as a catalyst to get people into the town and to make more of the QE Hall than we currently do, and also in terms of the tourism economy, getting people here who might not currently choose to come here. And it also says that we are not making the most of our position in Greater Manchester, where if people read these things, hotel occupancy in Greater Manchester is only second to London, and the demand for rooms is extremely high. So, we are underperforming in the hotel market, and this is about dealing with that. In terms of Hotel Future and where it's up to, so we have a scheme. And the scheme's been costed, and that's going through a process now of what the professionals call value engineering and what I call saving some cash, because we need to make sure that it is the most cost-effective building, and there is not a blank cheque on this. It's got to be affordable, it's got to make commercial sense, and if it works on the business model that's been provided, it won't cost the council, it will actually generate an income to the council for the rent and the lease option, which will be a boost. But we are going to review all options, and before Christmas, as I said to the earlier question, there'll be a report that will come back that will lay out all those options, and of course members have the right to scrutinise that and to look at it in more detail at that point.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Can I ask Councillor Harkness?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Cabinet on the 21st of July, page 42, item 7. I do welcome the report where there's a proposed consultation for the council tax reduction scheme. There is a movement in the right direction. I think we've got to remember that the first council's tax reduction scheme, which was introduced by his council, was the most draconian in Greater Manchester and the second most draconian in the North West. So there is some movements in the right direction. But I do note that there's still no reference to setting up a hardship fund. Now there's another Greater Manchester authority bordering this one, Rochdale, which is now considering this scheme, which goes on top of Stockport's scheme as well. So it would be a good idea that this formed a part of the consultation. Will the Cabinet member responsible like to comment on that? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jabbar, are you going to respond to that?
Yeah, just bear in mind, Mr. Mayor, how this scheme came about. His government decided to hit the poorest and the most poorest community in our borough, and they introduced this local council tax scheme. They took away the funding from this council, and as a direct result, we had to develop this scheme. So it wasn't our fault, it was your fault, Councillor, your government's fault for bringing this in. Now, as far as the scheme is concerned, let me tell you the true facts. We have the highest level of collection for the council tax reduction scheme in whole of the Greater Manchester. Whole of the Greater Manchester, the highest, at 77%. Now, I would have thought that you would have acknowledged that. Now, of course, it's very difficult, Mr. Mayor. This is something that we are forced to implement locally under national legislation. Of course, it's difficult. And of course, I want the taper to be lower because we're dealing with the poorest section of our community. And, you know, we take this very seriously. We have promised that we will every year review the scheme, and from last year we reviewed it and we reduced the contribution from 25% to 20%, and we're doing the same thing again, and if the evidence is there we will reduce it again. But let me tell you this, Mr. Mayor, in order to mitigate the impact of the welfare reform, we have established 4 welfare right officers, and let me tell you what the 4 welfare right officers have done in the last 12 months. They've helped the residents of this borough, and through that help, they've generated extra £3 million of benefits for the people of Oldham. And that's what we've done as a Labour Council, willing to help the vulnerable people, the most deprived, the poor in our borough. And that's the difference between Labour and Lib Dems over there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jabbar. Councillor Hudson, did you indicate you wanted to...
No, I was indicating that Councillor Harkness was the first to put his hand up, but you've called him now.
Thank you for that. Councillor Heffernan?
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Minutes of the 21st of July, page 46, item 14, 48, item 20, or 47, item 20. The Shore Pallet Works site on Huddersfield Road, Diggle, for the replacement of Sadworth School. It's an observation, Mr. Mayor, rather than a question. I notice option 3, proceed to acquire an option to acquire the backland of the site. This was the original proposal by a group of councillors from that area, right at the very beginning. The Education Funding Authority are currently due to make a review of the proposals. So I have to say, Mr. Mayor, I'm very pleased, I know the Cabinet member isn't here tonight, that you have gone ahead with the proposal to acquire an option on the backland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heffernan. You've very nicely taken me into the observation section now. Do any members of the Council who are not Cabinet members have observations on the minutes?
I could be allowed to answer that because it was asked in the question.
Councillor McMahon.
Sorry, can I thank Councillor Heffernan for his non-question observation. It was more to make clear just where we are in the process, really, because we could be in danger of giving people the impression that because we've acquired an option on the site for the backland, that will ultimately be the school site. It's not the council's decision as to which site the school is built on. What we're trying to do, and to be fair, this is cross-party as an approach, is to provide the best possible solution that balances the needs of providing a brand new school in what is a quite constrained timescale and budget with the community demand as well. And the original view from the government was that only the front site would be developable within that scheme. When they decided to go and review and do a feasibility of all options, we were very keen to make sure that we didn't lose the initiative and effectively miss out because we hadn't taken action to secure an option on this site. So ahead of the feasibilities coming back, we've secured an option, which means that there should be no reason why the government can't support this. The other thing we've said is the council is not in this to make money at all. We're in this to try and provide a new school for the children of Saddleworth and other children that go there. And what we have said is, and there is a lot of suspicion in Saddleworth around the land acquisitions and house builders, and is a council making loads of money. There is a transaction that's going to take place, and there will be a payment made to the council. What we've said is that we will use that money for Saddleworth School. So to improve facilities, to deal with the issues that have been raised by the local community, like parking, like access, like the listed building on the site as well, to try and make it the best possible scheme within a timescale that isn't in our control, a budget that hasn't been set by us, and let's face it, confusion about what on earth is going on this. But I am pleased that we have cross-party support in the Chamber for delivering a new school for the children of Saddleworth.
Do any members of the council who are not cabinet members have observations on the responses given? Councillor Sykes?
Yeah. Thank the leader for his response. It's page 4411, school expansion, East Crampton St George's. The reason I asked, both this year and last year, a number of parents have not been able to place their child in anything like what I would always understand this council's always done, doorstep provision of the nearest primary school, and it's also part of the council's proposals to use problems with a lack of places adjoining Sean Crompton, to use some places in Sean Crompton for that. So I suppose the observation, like I say, is I hope the Cabinet member will work with local members to identify where we can expand other schools, because we will need them not only for the up-and-coming pupils in Sean Crompton, but also if we're to serve the other bits of the borough as well. Otherwise, those children are going to end up sent from one side of Oldham to another, and that's something we've avoided with our primary school children in this borough for as long as I've been a member of it, and I think we should continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. Any other observations, David? Councillor Hoole?
Thank you. It's just on the consultation for the tax reduction scheme. I think we must just, the observation is that this is a positive consultation in the light of a very damning thing we're having to do. I think that what's going to come out of this looks as if it be positive for the people of Oldham. So it's a good thing that we're able to actually have a little bit of good news against what is a very bad backdrop. Thank you.
Any further observations? You're doing well. Thank you. Can we move on to item number 13? I call on Councillor Roberts to move and Councillor Ahmed to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The first observation I'd like to make is I think there's been a small typo. The issue that this motion is actually addressing is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which I'm going to refer to as TTIP in my remarks, as the former is rather a mouthful. So what is TTIP and why does it matter to Oldham? TTIP is an agreement that is being negotiated between the United States and the European Union. These are secret negotiations, but there have been some leaks, which is why we do know something about what is under discussion. And what is under discussion has big implications for democracy. The treaty could raise real questions about where power lies. Is it with governments and the people they represent, or is it with multinational corporations? And the discussions are about removing regulatory differences between markets and opening up trade between the United States and the European Union. The two areas that I would like to focus on are the implications for wages, low wages and wages in Oldham, and potentially the National Health Service. TTIP, if it's agreed in the current 4-month negotiation, will allow transnational corporations to sue national governments for future lost profits arising from government decisions. So that means that our government could decide to do something, an American corporation could decide that has affected its bottom line, and it could sue our government to get the money back. So the two areas that I think should and do concern the people of Oldham are around the impact this could have on the national minimum wage. We've already heard from the leader of the council earlier on in his report about the importance of the developing business and Oldham's economy and trying to raise the wages for Oldham. The national minimum wage, as I'm sure everyone is aware, is reviewed annually. This October it will go up to £6.50 an hour from £6.31. £6.50 is still substantially below the £7.65 which is considered to be the living wage. Potentially in the future the United Kingdom government could be sued for profits lost by paying higher wages required by raising the national minimum wage. Low pay is a real issue in Oldham. Pay in Greater Manchester is lower than across the United Kingdom, and it's even lower in Oldham than the average across Greater Manchester. In Oldham, employees earn £2.50 less for each hour they work than in the rest of the United Kingdom. Part-time workers are significantly more affected by low pay and women more than men. In Oldham, 55% of part-time workers earn less than the living wage. TTIP would threaten a future Labour government's intention to ensure that the national minimum wage is increased to get closer to average earnings and to help to reduce the wage gap for Oldham people. Even the Governor of the Bank of England recognises that the recession has been a calamity for wages and the standard of living in this country. The second reason for Oldham residents to be concerned is the potential impact on the NHS. United States healthcare organisations and companies are eyeing up the NHS in the market that was created by the 2012 Health and Social Care Act passed by the coalition government, an act which the future Labour government is pledged to repeal. France has succeeded in getting the audiovisual industry excluded from the TTIP negotiations. I think that means their film industry. And so our government could and should do more to ensure... Oh, sorry.
Everybody agree?
I can't see the light from here. Could and do more to ensure that the NHS is excluded from TTIP and that to prevent our government being sued by transnational corporations. The government has been silent on this issue, and I believe it's time for the government to act to secure these benefits or to make sure that the old people in Oldham do not lose by this negotiations. Thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Ahmed to second that?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to second this motion, which Councillor Roberts has already said it's a very, very important resolution. I think I would go a step further. I've been coming to this chamber since 1992, and I think since that time, this is probably one of the most important resolutions that I have seen. It's going to have impact on lives of not just each and every citizen of this country, but it's going to have impact on each and every citizen for the next generation and the many, many generations to come. Without any consultation, without any referendum, without any election manifesto, we are handing over the sovereignty of the Parliament, of the people, of the courts of this country to a panel of corporate solicitors. It's being negotiated on our behalf by European Union. Now, public of this country has said many, many times that we have handed over too many powers to European Union. We're going a step further now. We're handing over even those powers to a panel of corporate solicitors who will decide in future whether any decision made by our Parliament is right or wrong. It's happening in other countries. Australian Parliament made a decision to introduce plain packaging for cigarettes. That decision was validated by Australian Supreme Court. But Philip Morris are suing the Australian government because they don't like that decision. So we need to be very, very clear that ugly face of capitalism is now going to get uglier. These will have huge implications for NHS. We will be forced to privatize what's already not privatized. Huge chunks has already been privatized, but we will now be forced to privatize what else is left or what else the Wall Street vultures want. We will have to make sure it goes to the to private hands. Mr. Mayor, leader gave an example of how the household income, when it reduces, the families have to make cuts. If your disposable income you have to spend on your family is reduced, you have to cut your budget, whether it's the food budget or clothing budget or travel budget. NHS is struggling financially at the moment, like local authorities, like many other institutions. They're all struggling. There is not going to be any additional funding for NHS in real terms. Same amount of funding will now go to the private sector, whereas at the moment it is being spent on the care, health and care of the nation. Part of it will go to the directors' bonuses, part of it will go to shareholders' dividends, and the rest will be spent on the National Health Service, the core business which is looking after the people. So you'll be doing same work with less money. And these vultures who are going to come from the Wall Street, they're not here for the passion that current NHS staff have. They are here to make money. Their priorities will be different. Their policies will be different. They will cherry pick. They will not want all the services. They will just pick up the profit-making services and leave the loss-making services with the current NHS. And that's not all. We in the local authority have been discussing with the NHS to integrate our working, to bring healthcare and social care together, to give better service to the people of Oldham. Forget about that. That ain't going to happen. If Invesco take over running of the hospitals, they don't want to sit with you. They will just do the operations and throw out the patients on the street. You go and find the care for them.
Everybody agree?
Mr. Mayor, we can stop that. Well, this David Cameron can stop that. He can put an end to all this. He goes around and wraps himself in a British flag as and when it suits him. He can stand up and say to EU, that he doesn't like anyway, that NHS is a no-go area. You can negotiate whatever you want, but leave NHS out of it. It is jewel in the crown as far as this country is concerned. It is the biggest national asset. We need to save it. We need to preserve it. I second the motion.
Time's up. Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the motion? Got Dr. Chauhan. Dr. Chauhan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I quite like the short form TTIP, by the way. I don't like the original TT, but anyway. Mr. Mayor, it's not only NHS or it's not only our minimum wage which is going to be effective. TTIP, in addition to everything else, reducing tariffs and increasing protection for transnational investors, TTIP also improves to remove what they call barriers or so-called harmonization of our rules. And do you know what those harmonization rules or what those barriers are? For example, simple one, our labor rights. So our labor rights will be affected. Environment, our food safety, Mr. Mayor, our digital privacy, and our banking standards. So everything will get affected. It's not only our NHS and it's not only our minimum wage. Mr. Mayor, we don't need to go back too far to understand what's been happening. Don't we know who brought competition into NHS?
Yeah, you did.
No. Not me. Mr. Mayor, that competition into NHS, that Social Health Care Act, you can't blame me for that, Councillor Syke. What was the purpose of that? That was all the preparation for all days. Now what's going to happen? NHS is up for competition. Big multi-millionaire, billionaire companies are going to come and take over our NHS. And it's not only that, Mr. Mayor, it's the way it was done. Who's negotiating this? Not us, not our MPs, not our MEPs. They have not got the clue. All they've been told to come and vote, either accept it or reject it. You can't modify it, Mr. Mayor. And give you some interesting figures. 560 meetings were held. 560 meetings were held in preparation of negotiation. And guess what? Out of those 560, 520 meetings were with business lobbies. And guess, 26 meetings were only with unions or with the public interest groups. And that tells you what is the purpose of this TTIP. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Chauhan. Can I, Councillor Jabbar?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to support this motion. And first of all, can I, Mr. Mayor, congratulate Councillor Roberts and Ahmed for bringing this very important issue before us this evening, because I'm absolutely convinced not a lot of people actually are aware of the content of the TTIP proposals. And the issue here is this, that it will have a profound impact on our lives, everyone's lives, as Councillor Ahmed has said. There has been very little coverage in the mainstream media, either electronically or press media. And you wonder why that is the case. And yet, if you look at the full scope of what the proposal, it has got a very wide-ranging coverage, which includes services as well as goods. And Mr. Mayor, can I just say that I'm not actually against trade agreements, because I think trade agreements with right level of safeguards can help to create jobs, can help to offer choices to consumers, can help to develop a local community, can actually help to reduce prices for commodities. So, as per se, trade agreement between different nations is not a bad thing. But let me assure you, this trade agreement, trade deal, the proposed one, the TTIP agreement, is no ordinary trade deal. I can assure you of that. Just look at the massive scope that it has. And, you know, it is true, the supporter of this will say that it will bring down, it will reduce bureaucracy. It will lead to prices being reduced for some commodities. It's true. And it will actually offer opportunities for British businesses. There's no doubt about that. But what is the flip side of this? The flip side is this, that, you know, in my view, this is extremely dangerous. The reason is because it represents a massive attack on the sovereignty of democratically elected government. It is irreversible, and it attempts to harmonize standards between EU and the US, are likely to hit hard on protection on food and chemical safety. I think previous speakers have mentioned this, but let me give you a specific example. GM food. You know GM products are not illegal in EU, but under this agreement, it could be, and we would have no control over it. Locally or nationally, we would have no say in it, because this agreement could actually allow EU products to be sold, GM products to be sold throughout EU. The other thing is the threat of suing national governments. So as Councillor Roberts, when she spoke, she says that, you know, if you pass a legislation which is in the interest of the public, but it actually impacts the profits of the private companies, then those private companies can sue the national government. And at the moment, under a similar trade agreement, Mr. Mayor, Cuba is being sued by a company because they decided to ban fracking in their country. That's the real danger. Now, nobody talks about all that. If you go into the EU website, you'll see all the benefits of it. But nobody is actually talking about the flip side of this. So I'm also worried about the issues that's been talked about by Councillor Ahmad about the NHS. I think it could completely privatise.
So would you agree?
Privatise our NHS, and I think it's a very significant worry. So, Mr. Mayor, I think the negotiations have been conducted in closed doors, as Dr. Chouhan has said, and it's not right. We need an urgent debate about the content of TTP so that we can understand what it is. And, you know, there is a danger. Without this debate, national debate, we could be sleepwalking into an agreement which will be disastrous for our democratic process, and also it will be disastrous for our NHS. I urge everyone in this council chamber, please vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're happy to support this motion, but I've just have to have my colleague give me a slap round the head because I thought I was either in a UKIP rally or I'd reverted back to Dad's army and we're all doomed. I can assure you, we're not. And let's just kill some myths. And I have some concerns, so do my colleagues, but can we just be realistic? We already have free trade agreements with countries such as South Korea, Mexico, South Africa and others, and over 100 bilateral agreements. None of these have led to the privatisation of the NHS. TTIP will not affect provision in the NHS because NHS commissioners will take decisions on which providers should deliver services in the best interest of their patients as set out in the procurement, patient choice and competition regulations. But let's get to the crux of the matter. What TTP is about potentially £10 billion. That's £400 million for every household in this country. And I want to make sure Oldham gets its share of that. In fact, I don't just want to have its share, I want to have it more than its share. So, of course, with a deal like this, some people are going to be concerned about potential impact of an agreement, including its potential impact on the NHS, which some people seem to be scaremongering about. The European Commission have been clear they're not seeking to privatise publicly run services through this or any other trade agreement, and they will uphold high European standards of environment, health and consumer protection. As I said, we've already got hundreds of trade agreements, 100 bilateral agreements, and none have led to the privatisation of the NHS. The balance between public and private provision of public services will, quite rightly, continue to remain with national governments regardless of the progress of TTIP. I say again, quite rightly, public services and the balance between private and national will remain with national governments regardless of the progress of TTIP. Far from the NHS being in danger, TTIP negotiations have the potential to actually benefit NHS users through extra collaboration across pharmaceutical and life sciences sectors. There will be no change in the access to the NHS for private providers, and there will be no change to the principle that access to NHS services are based on needs and not the ability to pay. It was the Liberal Democrats who stopped the Tory privatisation plans, and we reversed Labour's policies which allowed private health companies to get special favours. Labour have paid private companies £250 million for operations they never performed, and we've made sure that won't happen in the NHS. So don't stand there lecturing me about what might happen. Let's talk about what did happen and what you did. So, no trade agreement, no trade investment agreement has ever been negotiated publicly. We've had the leader tonight talking about a couple of developments here, subject to negotiations, are rightly so conducted behind closed doors and then presented for the appropriate people to approve or not. That's how you do negotiations. You know that, I know that, the world knows that. So let's not try saying that something's going on behind closed doors. It's be like playing poker if you're having a negotiation, particularly if you're negotiating with the USA and showing your hand. However, it's important that TTIP negotiations are as open as possible. While previous trade agreements have been subject to confidential agreements, the Commission has taken the unprecedented step of publishing important documents at the start of the TTIP process. That's not a leak, it's taken a step to publish some. So, if the EU, and let's get to the end of this process, reaches an agreement with the US in principle, final text of that agreement will be sent to 28 nation states. Not the EU decides, each of the individual 28 signatories in the current EU, and we are one of those. Or we might be two by next Thursday, you never know. And they must agree unanimously.
Everybody agree?
To that final deal, as well as the European Parliament. If the deal doesn't deliver the objectives that the EU have demanded or that the nation states want, they can reject it and the deal will fall. And that's your safeguard. So it isn't a done deal. It isn't people doing things on our behalf. They're the people we pay our taxes to negotiate, just like we have officers here that do our bidding on our behalf and then present members with a decision. So let's talk about facts. Let's not scaremonger. Happy to support the resolution, but, you know, it's not the end of the world. The planet's suddenly not going to stop spinning, and we're not all doomed. We need to keep an eye on this, but let's keep it in proportion, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hikes. Councillor Hudson.
Mr Mayor, I'm not very happy with decisions they take in the EU, and I feel very pleased tonight that a lot of members seem to be giving speeches that they might vote against the EU, and we might come out. I'll be quite happy with that. But I'm still unhappy with motions like this that do nothing for the cooperative borough of Oldham. MPs and MEPs are well paid, a lot more paid than we are, and they should be getting on with this. This isn't anything we can have anything about. I'm very pleased that Riaz thinks David Cameron has this wonderful power. He hasn't displayed his power before in all the things I've asked him to do. But if he can stop this, thank you, Riaz, for telling me. I'll be on to him tomorrow. But I don't think any one person, as Howard quite rightly says, can stop this, really. But neither should this be a Labour rally. It really is quite silly. I know Anna is very accomplished and she did a very good job, but it was crap, really. And to be honest, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, I'll rephrase that to not to my taste. And I really think these sort of things waste our time, and the public of Oldham don't appreciate it. So really, we all want to improve communication. We all want to make the EU, and we want Parliament to listen more to people. But debating and having this political argument is just wasting taxpayers' money in Oldham.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Can I ask Councillor Heffernan?
I will be brief, Mr. Mayor. I've seen a lot of me tonight. I think we need to look at this in a slightly different way than the majority party have. As has been said, when we do business in this council, we have a phrase, commercial in confidence. We have blue paper reports that are not publicly intended. This is quite normal. It happens in councils, it happens in Parliament, it happens in big business. You don't show the whole of your hand. Councillor Sykes has made the point that when an agreement is reached, if an agreement is reached, and I think it probably will be with the US, it will go to each of the 28 member states who will vote on it, and it has to be unanimous. What you need to do is to make sure our MPs are going to look at this properly when they have the details. It is £10 billion into this country. It's a huge amount of money into Europe. We know the dangers of the American investors. We saw it recently with Pfizer and AstraZeneca, and you will notice that AstraZeneca is not part of Pfizer. We can do something. Let us take this sensibly, and remember, they can sue the British government if they believe they've been subject to discriminatory treatment in that country. To say that you have to pay a living wage, to use that phrase, or we won't deal with you, is not discriminatory, as long as it's the same for everybody. They would have to show, as Philip Morris is hoping to show, and I think they will fail in Australia, that they have been picked on. So I laud the sentiments of the motion. I think they are great, but I think that we do need a lot more information, and I would urge members to keep their eye on the ball. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Heffernan. Now I think we're in the last 2 minutes. I'm going to ask Councillor Klonsky, if you can be brief, please.
Yeah, I will be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think people from both sides, well, all three sides, Lib Dems, Labour and Tories, made some good points. I'm quite glad to see that people are thinking the EU might not be a perfect body. I would say one thing, we could do our own FTA agreements like the Swiss. They got 26, EU's got 25. They got free trade agreements with Canada, Japan and China, which the EU doesn't, because the EU is too slow and cumbersome. But more importantly, the EU doesn't seem to do trade agreements for services, whereas Switzerland have done their own. So the EU has only got 6 free trade agreements for services. Service economy is the biggest part of the British economy, and the EU is rubbish at doing them. So I think there's so many fundamental things wrong with TTIP, and one of the worst things about it is that the EU is doing it on our behalf, supposedly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we've run out of time on this. So, does Councillor Roberts wish to reply? Depends what it is.
Well, you're not going to know until I ask it. Councillor Roberts pointed out that there was an error in the a typo in the document. Can we just, if we're going to move that as an amendment from the floor, just to make sure that what goes out from this council is accurate?
Could you address that then, please, Councillor Roberts?
Yes, thank you. I would like to move that as an amendment then, that we amend it to read correctly as the investment partnership. In the first line. It implicates, sorry, it's in on the top of it's not the numbered page. On the top of the second page, of the resolution, so on the right-hand side, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down, it calls it. It calls on the sort of the top. It calls it the Transatlantic Trade and Agreement Partnership, and it should read Investment Partnership. So I move that as an amendment.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just would like to reply briefly, if I can, to the substantion of the debate. I mean, I'm sorry that you felt that it was, or I'm sorry, John, that it wasn't to your taste, but I don't think it would be to the taste of the people of Oldham for some of the consequences should the agreement go through as currently being negotiated, which is why I thought it was important to put the resolution. And I think in response to some of the things that were said by the other opposition, I think that it's important to note that that what is new about this agreement and what is very serious about this agreement in terms of ongoing implications for democratic processes is the special court, the Investor State Dispute Settlement Court, which will meet in secret with corporate lawyers making decisions about whether or not the complaints made by multinational corporations are justified. That is something which is not in any other trade agreement that we have, and is something that I think we should all be very concerned about. So for all of the reasons that I have given and that my colleagues on this side have given, I would urge you please to support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Does the councillor agree with the motion?
Yeah.
Those in favour? Keep them up. Those against? Councillor Brown? Any abstentions? Two. Okay. The motion is carried. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I call on Councillor Dillon to move and Councillor Sedgwick to second the motion. The opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Something perhaps a bit closer to people which they can understand. Could I move the motion as printed? Mr. Mayor, one of the advantages of being in this council chamber is, of course, that we're away from these nuisance calls, but nuisance telephone calls must be becoming the #1 irritant for people. Citizens of the borough are getting about 2 or 3 a day. I know I do. They pick up the phone and hear the dreaded words, "You can have a new government-funded gas boiler and solar panels." Alternatively, it could be a boiler room. These are organisations which are usually set up abroad, which pressurise people to invest in, and I put in invest in inverted commas, in non-existent or worthless companies, or there's no investment at all. These scams have cost our citizens many millions of pounds. This includes people who've been duped into giving their banking details over the phone to criminals who promptly empty their accounts. As I have said earlier, a lot of organisations operate from abroad to get around the telephone preference service. However, this is not a safeguard, as the motion states. The regulatory system over companies is overcomplicated and there have been few prosecutions. Nuisance calls have got so bad that I know some people will not answer their landlines and are using mobiles instead. Grudgingly, they paid landline rental just to have the broadband facilities. Phone companies, however, can help customers by offering facilities like caller display free of charge. I have received this leaflet from BT advertising a call blocker, but in the small print it says that charges may apply. I do have caller display which helps me filter such calls as international. Hello, can I speak to Mr Dillian? Can I speak to Alan Dillon? Dead giveaway. But as a councillor, I notice that there are withheld calls which you think is telemarketing, but sometimes it's a constituent and gets you on the back foot. I remember a trader commented to me once that callers who do not tell him who they are, he will not talk to them. And I think a lot of people are taking that view. However, we need legislation to fine, name and shame these companies who make these nuisance telemarketing calls. We need to support the elderly and the vulnerable against these unscrupulous operators. I'm sure that our Trading Standards Officers can give many instances of people who have been duped. We must ensure that Trading Standards Officers and other organisations have the power to fight this 21st century menace. Please support this motion and give our residents a bit of peace and quiet. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Sedgwick to second the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very pleased to second this motion as printed. I know that I speak for thousands of people in our borough when I say that action must be taken to stop the number of nuisance calls we all receive on a daily basis. These calls are very distressing and in some cases very frightening, especially to our elderly and vulnerable in our communities. People are sick and tired of being bombarded with these calls. The current system is failing the public, and given the scale of this problem, it is time for something to be done. We urgently need to take a new approach, new laws and new technology to tackle this scourge on people's lives. A few weeks ago, I had a phone call, 5 minutes to midnight. I had just got in bed and the phone rang, telling me I could get a new boiler for free because I was of a certain age. I was appalled. Lo and behold, this morning, now this is a new one, I got a phone call today asking me had I made a will and did I know the rising cost of a funeral and had I got adequate cover. I gave him an answer. I don't think he will be ringing me again. I support this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sedgwick. Does any member wish to speak on the motion?
Move the vote.
Move to order. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Does Councillor Dillon wish to reply? He has to, doesn't he? Yeah.
The vote's been moved, Mr Mayor, and thanks Councillor Sedgwick for the support on this. And following that the council not put an amendment in, I'm happy that members of this council support this motion to help our citizens. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Although it's been put to vote, but you still have the right to reply. Does the council agree with the motion? Thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you.
Does it include political callers? I'm only asking
what time of the year it is.
Hold me up yesterday asking me from another party.
I now call on Councillor Williamson to move and Councillor McCann to second this second motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to move the motion about tax equality as printed in the Green Book. Local restaurants and public houses are facing very challenging conditions in this current economic climate, and they are being put under further pressure because of the significant disparity between the VAT rate on food sales in supermarkets and sales in cafes, pubs and restaurants. At present, cafes, restaurants and pubs are obliged to pay the full 20%, whereas supermarkets pay a zero rate of VAT on food sales. The UK has such a rich and unique pub heritage. So it is such a shame when you travel around Greater Manchester and beyond to see so many of them closed and then turned into something completely different. Across the country in the last 10 years, about 10,000 pubs have closed down. Camera figures show that 31 pubs are closing every week in the UK. I know that I don't have to go that far to see this sort of thing happening. Just in Shoreham Crompton, on various parts of Rochdale Road, we've had 3 pubs close. The Star is now a hairdresser's. Wagon and Horses and the Colliers are now being turned into residential developments. The Cricketers on Milnrow Road is now boarded up. And we must not forget the pub that was the King's Arms, then it was the Big Lamp, and then it was called the King's Arms again before it was knocked down near the Big Lamp roundabout. Whether you go into a pub for a pint and something to eat, a restaurant for a nice sit-down meal, or a cafe for something quick to eat and drink, they do play a vital role in our high street by allowing people to socially interact in a nice environment rather than just going home to have a drink. On last year's Tax Parity Day, approximately 15,000 pubs and restaurants took part, with some big names in the hospitality industry, supporting the initiative by giving their customers a taste of what things could be like with a lower VAT rate. Sales increases were reported by Amber Taverns between 10 and 23%, Fuller's 8% and JD Wetherspoons 20%. This is not just about making the customer happy and I suppose increasing sales for the 50 or so organisations who are part of the Jacques Brel VAT Club. It's about jobs as well. In France, where there was a tax reduction from 19.65% to 5%, this led to the creation of 215,000 jobs in the first year alone. It is estimated that lower prices, a reduction of VAT to 5%, would create between 294,000 jobs and 670,000 jobs in the UK's hospitality sector, many of which would be for 16 to 24-year-olds. This is welcome news, as although youth unemployment is under 1 million, now 760,000, we need to get it down further. It is an extremely hard industry to work in, but it does provide young people with an opportunity to understand a work ethic. It does not seem fair that you are charged 20% VAT for the privilege of going out for a meal with friends, family or colleagues, but zero if you buy the same meal and drink in a supermarket. This campaign is not suggesting that VAT should be added to the weekly shop, but there should be some fairness in the opposite direction. On this note, Mr Mayor, I urge members to support this notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor McCann to second that motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This motion really complements and comes up, tries to support the same problem we've had and tried to address in previous motions and in part with the leader's speech. Because what this is trying to do is to take people away from going for the cheapest, strongest alcohol, which causes damage in drunken volume, and trying to get them into a more social, responsible atmosphere. So what you actually have is that besides improving some businesses, you'd also have a massive saving on the cost of treating these people who abuse alcohol and abuse the social system. So they're actually damaging the bodies and they're damaging the social fabric, just as the police. And I know that in past times we had major problems in Oldham. That was a no-go area for the amount of drunks in the town centre at the weekend. That's been reduced and cut down a lot. But I think this will be one part of the jigsaw to try and get more responsible behaviour for people. So it's a slightly different way of coming at it. Rather than telling the supermarkets you can't sell alcohol other than by making a profit, you can't sell it as a loss leader and draw people in, you're actually saying to the pubs, restaurants and cafes
that by reducing their cost, they can actually compete more successfully with the supermarket. So rather than go and buy a crate of lager, they can go down to the cafe or a restaurant. And a lot of people that can then afford to do it will actually be family members, and the children will be brought up to use the social availability of a cafe, a restaurant or a pub more responsibly. I think one of the big things is that the pubs in particular seem to be struggling to survive. I do my bit with the one near the house, and Councillor Hibbert I know does his bit, responsible drinking. But what it is that if they could actually reduce their prices by 7.5%, people may not drink a lot more, but what they would do, hopefully, is take the family in for a Sunday lunch or go in on a Friday afternoon after school, so the kids, as in European countries, get used to being in that atmosphere where there is alcohol available, but they don't have to drink a massive amount and get legless. They can have coffee, they can have other drinks, and this would, because it would reduce the cost of that, would make these places able to compete with the supermarkets. The supermarkets are very efficient businesses, but they have no moral responsibility and no interest at all in the wider society, is my take. So this hopefully will help the smaller businesses, will help the villages in Saddleworth, will help the hotel. Why will it help a hotel future? Because in there, with a basic lower cost, you could perhaps attract more people to come in, to have the wedding, to have the party, or to just go in for a Saturday afternoon. We'll go to the hotel, kids. It'll be an experience, a family experience. And the difference in not charging VAT at a ridiculously high rate on food, because it is food after all, might actually mean that people learn to behave as responsible citizens. And I think this is one of the big things of this motion, that actually by getting more people in a responsible situation, you're cutting down this irresponsible, selfish behaviour. I think that it was instructive that when they tried this, Wetherspoons...
Is that agreed?
Wetherspoons reported that 20% more pints and meals were sold on the day they tried this 7.5% reduction. Pints I'm not madly interested in, but the meals was a fascinating thing. If a business can sell 20% or 10% more meals in a day, that makes a major difference to its basic cost structure. I think that the other point, of course, is that there are a wide range of companies supporting this. You have people like Pret a Manger supporting it.
You're out of time now, Councillor McCann.
Mr Mayor, I'm asking people to support this motion.
Thank you. Now, I've not even asked members whether they wish to speak or not, and I've already had 4 indications. Now, I'm not going to deny anyone the right to speak, but I can tell you one thing. We've got another motion here, so it's entirely up to yourselves. The first speaker was Councillor Hull.
Mr Mayor, there's no getting away from the fact that VAT is a regressive tax, VAT is a regressive tax. That's been confirmed by David Cameron, who said if you look at the effect as compared with people's income, then yes, it is regressive. Yes, it hits the poorest hardest. Mr Mayor, we wouldn't be debating this motion if VAT had remained at 17.5%, but we are, because it went up to 20% in 2010 because of Nick Clegg's broken promise. Nick Clegg campaigned against what he called a Tory VAT bombshell during the election in 2010. There it is. And he then campaigned against it, and then during the election, but it was a bombshell he helped the Tories to drop by voting 20% for VAT. Now, the Lib Dem record is one of broken promises. He's trebled tuition fees after promising to scrap them. He's promised fairer taxes in tougher times and then went on to back tax cuts for millionaires. He's promised to protect the NHS, then he's backed David Cameron's pricey and unsuccessful overhaul of the system. We've seen broken promises on Sure Start, police numbers and on living standards. OK, Mr Mayor, this motion is clumsy and in its current state is not worthy of support. A price reduction of 7.5% in pubs and restaurants would not encourage people to dine out more, and that's according to a survey of people on the ITV News Facebook page. Mr Mayor, respondents in a survey believed the price cut was too small to make a difference. It equates to £1.50 off a £20 meal. Mr Mayor, I dispute whether a VAT reduction in this sector would boost the economy. Lower prices wouldn't create more jobs. The few staff they employ now would have to work harder. That's how it works these days. It will probably increase zero-hours contracts, which is not what we want. If they drop the VAT for food outlets, the lost money would have to be made up somehow. And guess who would end up footing the bill? You and me, Mr Mayor. You and me. That's what's going wrong with this motion. It doesn't say how the gap in the finances will be filled. So we'll end up no better off, and the food companies wouldn't get any more business. As for the UKIP policy on this, there isn't one, which is very surprising given that their old soak of a leader, Farage, seems to be far away from a pub. So, Mr Mayor, for all the reasons stated, I urge members to vote against this motion on the basis that it's clumsy and only seeks to line the pockets of the big corporate companies in the sector. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Bashforth.
And as a fully paid up member of Camera, I'll just make that declaration first. I mean, I support my local pubs by going in them, and I always say this: if you don't go in your pub, you'll lose it. And that doesn't mean you have to go and get plastered every night. It means going in once a week, once a fortnight, once a month. Go in and enjoy the atmosphere. That's how you keep your pubs going. They're not shut because of the VAT increase. They're shut because people do not go in them. Now, a reduction, as Councillor Ewell said, of this reduction isn't going to tempt people away from the Sky TV, the big tellies, and out to the cosy homes. They're not going to do it with this. And so I'm not going to go over what's just said, but another reason that I'm not going to support this is because the motion's asking us to support this VAT club. Now, this VAT club is run by this very charismatic Frenchman, Jacques Barrel, who was incidentally paid over £1 million to run this campaign for UK companies. And in fact, the opening 2 paragraphs of the motion are verbatim of what the chairman of JD Williams said in a statement some time ago. So obviously it's coming from there. But the other thing about the VAT club, this is a company that was actually fined £9,000 for late payment of VAT in 2013. So do we?
JD Williams is quite a responsible employer and sure, it means JD Wetherspoons.
JD Wetherspoons. I fully apologise. And can I also add...
You accept that, do you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And can I add, Howard, that I'm a big fan of their outlets as well, so let's not say that I'm against it. But we're asked to support here an organisation that is actually taking money to look after the fiscal interests of private companies and who have got a dodgy VAT record themselves. We know nothing about it. It would be irresponsible for a council to support that without proper scrutiny. So if you want to support your pubs and your clubs and your restaurants, go there and spend your money there. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Harkness.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am quite surprised, really, with the response from over the other side. This isn't just JD Wetherspoons.
Very well done, Gal.
And I thought that Councillor McCann had already mentioned the fact that a lot of survey had been done and there was actually a rise in the amount of pints being sold and the amount of meals being sold. And the reason I was quite, that stuck in my mind is because I heard some words from Councillor McCann's mouth come out which said, pints I'm not interested in, which is something I thought I'd never hear Councillor McCann say. So I think, it seems to be suggesting that... Oh, he does. He pays his fair share, as Councillor McCann. So I'm not sure whether he's suggesting that they're liars or what, because, it is quite clear that that did improve it. But it is about fairness as well, because we've got a situation where supermarkets pay no VAT on food, where pubs have to pay 20%. contributions to the numbers of pubs closing, some of the pubs turning into supermarkets. Now, 12 months ago, Liberal Democrats in this chamber proposed a motion to work with Canberra, which is the Campaign for Real Ale, to support local pubs. And I thought we had a good cross-party dialogue where we got some good things moving forward. I didn't get everything I wanted, but of course, you know, I thought it was a good move forward. You know, because we had looked at condemning the conversion of pub sites to supermarkets and burgers and restaurants, exploring the opportunities to establish a town centre microbrewery, informing pubs to create employment opportunities, promoting the campaign's Real Ale List Your Local campaign, and agreeing the number of locals that will be listed as assets under the campaign. So we have a rich rich heritage, I think, and we need to ensure that we look at what is important in our community and fight for what needs to be protected. Pubs, particularly in Southwark, are community hubs. We've got a thriving pub. We've got 2 thriving pubs in Dobcross. One which was struggling recently and now is thriving. And I know that Saddleworth is part of the community, which creates a sense of togetherness and responsibility for local people and the local area. Ripping out these rips out part of the community. I know that we have a thing when we go in our local, we say it's care in the community, because I think there is a lot of care in the community, but you know, it may be a flippant remark, but it is a community hub which we will lose if we don't support these. And a lot of pubs now, particularly in Saddleworth, they all
Keep going.
They're all serving food.
Keep going.
But some of them are struggling, and it's just about fairness. You know, so they need to be on a level playing field with others. Yeah. So the tax also affects cafes and restaurants. So it makes no economic sense as well, because these businesses create jobs. So every business should pay its fair share, but it should be equal. For a fairer society, we need fair taxes, like raising the tax threshold and making the rich pay more. And just to remember, if somebody, if there's a rich person who earns £1 million a year, they pay £380,000 more than they did under Labour.
Great tax cut, though.
They've got,
Keep going.
and on the tax cuts, the Labour, it's okay. I will respond to him. It's fine. On the tax cuts,
Councillor Harkness, you're out.
the rich have paid more tax every single year.
Councillor Harkness, can you sit down now, please? It's out of time. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm going to just ask Councillor Moores to be brief, and I can't have any more speakers on this.
That's what we...
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I cannot support this motion because it's factually incorrect, misleading and lacks substance. I'll miss the first bit, but I'll go on to why it's misleading. Neither supermarkets or pubs or restaurants or cafes pay VAT on the goods or services they provide. It is a customer who pays. There is also a distinct difference between food purchased as part of the family shopping and food purchased to eat on the premises. The first one is a necessity. The second one is a luxury. Pubs and supermarkets are not being treated differently. If a local pub sold groceries, they would be 0 rated. If I purchase a meal in a supermarket cafe, I pay VAT at 20%. That seems like equality. I would also fail to see what costs the supermarkets are avoiding. Perhaps Councillor Williamson could explain. But as far as I know, supermarkets in Oldham are complying with VAT regulations. We all know that supermarkets use alcohol as a loss leader to get people into their stores. But many licensed premises will have similar schemes designed to bring people into their premises. In this period of coalition government enforced austerity, any initiative to create jobs is worth considering. But a reduction in VAT would have a significant impact on central government finances. This would result in one of two things: an increase in other taxes or a further reduction in services. Let's not put ideas into the heads of ministers who we know have perverse senses of fairness, or they may create what they may see as a level playing field by charging VAT on all food. As I said at the beginning, we can't support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does Councillor Williams wish to reply?
It's Williamson.
I do apologise. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to respond to some of the comments, in particular, first of all, Councillor Hall. So does that now mean that we have to believe everything that Facebook says? Is that right? Is that what you're saying? Because from what you're saying is that these organisations are not telling the truth, let me put it politely, and I think they would take extreme offence at you saying something like that. And just to talk about Councillor Bashforth's comment, the pubs, sometimes pubs are too expensive and that's why people aren't going in as well, so this would help. And even though some pubs are diversifying, they can't do it because of the cost of it. As it says, to answer Councillor Moore's comment, it says that about the costs, it says that supermarkets pay 0 VAT on food, so that's the cost. The other thing that I would like to say is that so even though your 19 Labour councillors are supporting this early day motion for VAT reduction for hospitality industry, you're saying that you don't support this, so you're going against your own members. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a bit of silence, please? Does Council agree the motion? Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? The motion is clearly carried. Lost. Now, Councillor Murphy, we've got this third motion, but we don't have the time, Councillor Murphy, so do you want to roll it on? Happy to roll it over? Okay.
Or take it straight forward.
No, we can't do that. We've got an amendment. So, okay, we'll roll it over. Thank you very much. Can we move on to item 15, minutes of the joint authority minutes? We've only got 6 minutes on this, members. When you've all finished, following the agreement of full council, this section will be split into two. The first part to consider the joint authority minutes and the second part to consider the partnership minutes. I call on the spokesperson of the joint authorities to move the minutes as submitted. Greater Manchester Waste Disposal Authority, Councillor Dean. Thank you. Association of Greater Manchester Authorities Executive, Councillor McMahon. Thank you. Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Councillor McMahon again. Joint AGMA Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Councillor McMahon again. Thank you. Transport for Greater Manchester, Councillor Briggs.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Police and Crime Panel, Councillor McMahon again. Thank you. Do any members of the council have questions on the minutes? Yeah, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to save time, it's the question is: in view of fires at the Waste Disposal Authority's recycling plant operated by Viridor Lang in Bredbury and the private recycling plant in Salford, could the spokesperson for Waste Disposal Authority advise whether there are any regulations under this action plan already existing to reduce the risk of fire in private recycling plants, and what actions have the Waste Disposal Authority taken in the action plan referred to in this minute to reduce the risk of fire in recycling plants owned by the authority and operated by Viridor Lang? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dean to respond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In regard to the Bredbury site, in actual fact, it wasn't a Greater Manchester Waste site, it was a neighbouring site, and basically Greater Manchester Waste have no authority. The authority lies with the planning authority and the fire service in that particular case. In regard to the Salford site, which is part of a contracted site to run by Viridor and Lang to Greater Manchester Authority, they have actually checked the site, and the site actually had every element of equipment, and they were conforming to all the regulations with it, both within the contract and the regulations for the fire service and other planning grounds. So basically it was a situation that was soon brought under control, and they operate to the regulations that are imposed on them.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Do any members of the Council have any observation on the minutes? Thank you. Now moving on to the minutes of the partnerships. We've only got 4 minutes on this. I call upon the spokesperson of partnership to move the minutes as submitted. Oldham Leadership Board, Councillor McMahon. Thank you. Do any members of the Council have questions on this minutes? Can I ask the relevant members to respond to the questions submitted? We haven't received any. Do any members of the Council have any observation on the minutes? No, thank you. The time we're on the the time allocated for these will be 5 minutes. Okay. I call on Councillor McMahon to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report of the pay policy statement. Thank you. Do any members wish to speak? Thank you. Does the Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. I call on Councillor McMahon to move and Councillor Jabbar to second the report. That's the Treasury Management Report, item 17. Thank you very much. Do any member wish to speak? Thank you. Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Agreed? Not loud enough, are you? Moving on to item 18, Independent Remuneration Panel recommendation. I call on Councillor McMahon to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report. Councillor McMahon? Thank you. Councillor Sykes, very quiet. Was it Councillor McCann or Councillor? I do apologise. Councillor McCann to second.
No, it's 18.
Yeah, it's item 18 we're on. Yeah, I know I'm going at a fast speed, but I've got 4 minutes.
Sorry, I do apologise. Yes, that's that one.
Okay, so you seconded it, Councillor Sykes. Do any members wish to speak? Thank you. Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Thank you. Item 19. I call on Councillor Stratton to move and Councillor McCann to second the report. Thank you, Councillor Jean. Thank you, Councillor McCann. Do any members wish to speak? Thank you. Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within this report? Agreed? Thank you. I call on Councillor McMahon to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report. Item 20. Agreed? Sykes, thank you. Do any members wish to speak? Thank you. Does Council agree the recommendation as detailed within the report? Thank you very much, and that concludes tonight's business for the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Are we okay? Oh, God, yeah.